All right, everybody, let's call this meeting to order. For anyone who I don't know, I'm Colin Clark, and I have the honor of being the board chair, and good to see everyone. Thank you to all our board members for coming to the retreat today. So first item of business is, do we have any, oh, here we go. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, yeah. So the date is September 23rd, 2022. The time is now 9 minutes after 12. And to ensure we have a quorum present, I am going to read out the names of the members of the executive committee. If you're here, please say present. Colin Clark, present. I know Lael is not here. Don Davidson. Cameron Johnson. Just say present if you're here. Ed Korea.
Here.
Thank you, Ed. Andre McEwen. John McPherson.
Here.
Thank you. James Stanson. Michael Stack. Present. Michael. John Beckert. Here. Pilar Davies.
Here.
Christine Vandevelde.
Here.
And Ricky Garcia.
Here.
Thank you everyone for being here today. I note we do have a quorum of the executive committee present, and I call to order this retreat of the Board of Uplift Education. First item of business is the community forum. Alex?
Well,
we have community speakers.
No, sir, we do not have any community speakers today.
Thank you, sir. Our next order of business is to consider and take action on the August 23rd, 2022 board meeting minutes, which were in the pre-read material. Are there any questions about the recommended minutes from anybody? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the board minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved by unanimous vote. Yasmin, you're up next. I'll hand it to you.
Great job. So good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to be with you all today. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us. We thought we'd get kicked off with what will probably be your favorite part of this afternoon, which is time with our school leaders and getting to hear of what is life like on the ground at our schools to kick off this school year. I also, before I introduce our school leaders, I want to share that we have many, if not all, of our managing directors in the back of the room sitting behind you all, and so they oversee our primary, middle, and high school. So thank you so much to all of our. So I am going to introduce these four fabulous school leaders who are with us today. I have just 3 questions to get the conversation going, but then I'm handing it over to y'all to ask questions of them. So please be thinking about what is on your mind that you'd like to share. And first of all, I want to start with just some words of appreciation. I know on behalf of the executive team and all of the members of the board that we are so grateful for the work that each of you do every day, serving our kids and supporting our staff. And it has been a complex past couple of years, and you all have navigated it with grace and courage and have been successful on each of your campuses. So thank you so much. The first 2 wonderful leaders sitting here to my left, I nicknamed them the AA batteries. Both of them have A-rated schools. So Karen Aldridge leads Uplift Crescendo Primary School in Fort Worth. And it was our first year for Uplift Crescendo to be open this past year, and it opened as an A school, which is the first time ever at Uplift that we've opened a school as an A-rated school. Karen was previously at Uplift Luna Primary School, so welcome, Karen. Shermanda Frazier. Shermanda leads Uplift Gratis Primary School in South Dallas. Her school was also A-rated. It has been one of the most successful turnarounds we've had at Uplift, and we're so proud of her leadership and work there. Prior to that, Shermanda's been in lots of schools, but she led Uplift Grand Primary School. So welcome, Shermanda. Then we have Brady Cooper with us. I think Brady and I have both been in the network at the same amount of time, so it's pretty awesome. Brady has also been on multiple campuses. He leads currently Uplift Grand High School in Grand Prairie. And Brady had the 2nd highest overall, what we call CCMR score. That's what the state calls it. It's like overall compilation of college readiness metrics, just behind North Hills for our class of 2022. So Brady, we are so glad to have you here too. Then joining him is Katie Woodiel from Uplift Luna Middle School. Katie really, there's so many impressive things about Katie. Last year, she was the stable leader and consistent and positive and focused leader at Luna Secondary as it was going through so much transition that many on the board learned about over the course of last year that was happening at the high school level, and just had that calm leadership presence to navigate. In last year's star performance, her kiddos in middle school who took Algebra 1, I think 95% passed, which is like 100%, I'm so sorry, 100% passed. 100% passed, which is just pretty incredible. Katie also, her school has been a leader in our SEL work at the network level for many years. And a lot of our work at the middle school level is modeled after the work at Luna Middle School. So welcome to all of these 4 wonderful leaders. Okay, so my first question for each of you to take is, which one of our network priorities do you think is going best on your campus right now? And maybe why? Start? Sure.
Okay. So at Crescendo, I think we are trending positively in the college readiness. Beginning of year map, our Q4 and Q5 scholars are either at the network standard or above. And so we should exceed those standards. We're trending that way right now, so I'm positive that we're doing pretty well there.
That's awesome. So for those who are still learning our acronyms, MAP is the National Norms Test that we take in the beginning of the year and the end of the year. It allows us to understand where our students sit relative to national quintiles. So we want our kids to be in the top 40%, which would be quintiles 4 and 5, and that's what we are shooting for. Thank you.
I can go next. So I would say that our biggest success story so far this year has been our staff culture. So we have really made it a point to make sure that staff feel welcome, feel loved every single day. And so we actually started at the bottom of the network at the very beginning in 2020. So we were at the 6th percentile for our Gallup survey. And I'm happy to say that now we're at the 87th percentile. So we are very excited about that.
You can hold people accountable and have happy culture too.
Yes, we can hold them accountable and have happy culture.
The thing I'm proud of this year is under the strategy of nailing the first instructional block. We are piloting something this year where we have a hybrid bell schedule. We were debating about the pros and cons between a 45-minute class every day versus a 90-minute class every other day. Mr. Carbone, our Deputy Chief of Schools, kind of challenged our thinking and said, why not both? And we spent a lot of summer trying to figure out a very complex bell schedule that would allow us to do both. And we have been pulling it off, and the response has just been overwhelming from the teachers in terms of seeing increased retention in our math classes, but also still allowing those classes that need longer, more project-based or labs that need that longer 90 minutes. Basically, we're meeting the needs of all the subject areas. It's really working well.
At Luna Middle School, something that stands out that I've really seen the output of more over the last few days, it was shaky at first, is we have an instructional priority right now, district-wide, called Everyone's a Writer. And so we've been using norm strategies 6th through 8th grade, really K through 12th grade across the district or network. And it's been great to see like scholar writing that's at the exemplar level start to be produced this week for our 6th through 8th graders, and we're excited to analyze that with our teachers and just see that continue to grow throughout the year.
So if we switch gears, what has been the biggest challenge you've had to navigate so far this year?
So for me, it's been resources. For example, Eureka Books, if we have 50 books, but we have 60 kids. So, I mean, we don't mind making copies, but it's just the equity issue of, okay, who gets a copy and who gets a book? And so that's the kind of things that we've been kind of working through. The Lavinia resources, just making sure we have those materials we've been using. We haven't had those, so we just been using our funds to purchase those. So that's the biggest, I guess, lift that we have right now.
So I definitely think that Gratis has a new set of challenges this year. So this is actually the first year where Uplift Gratis has the majority of our kids who are actually on grade level or above. And so like, what does that look like for instruction? How do we need to prep our teachers? What do they need to intellectually prepare? And what do our planning meetings look like so teachers feel confident in teaching at or above grade level?
I think the biggest challenge facing my campus and maybe schools all across the country is the teacher shortage. It's not just that we have vacancies across the network, but the quality of candidates that are coming in is drastically different than it was when we started this work, or when I joined Uplift 14 years ago. And so that's definitely a concern long term that I know that not just Uplift is trying to figure out, but as a country we have to figure out.
I echo what Brady says, and on top of the shortages, the extra work and stress that creates for our teachers and staff that are on campus, and just trying to figure out how to make that sustainable while sourcing candidates and knowing there might not be a long-term solution right now that looks like one in the past. And then a unique challenge at Luna is, and it's exciting for the move that's coming up, but there has been a lot of neighborhood stress and just information we're hearing from our parents about concern given our location that we haven't really had to field before. So just trying to, be more connected with our community and make sure we have a focus on safety outside of school in our community. It's really huge for our families right now.
Well, our countdown, 15 more months. Awesome. So my last question before I hand it over, so I hope the board members are thinking of a few things on their mind. If you, as the board thinks about where the network should be headed or what we should be doing, is there anything we aren't doing right now that you would say, I think we should be doing next?
Well, I don't know if like the board can help with these things, but just
You want to tackle your Eureka books?
I know. I would like the onboarding process to be a little faster. And even when they are onboarded and
For
they're
new hires.
Yes, for new hires. And then when they get on campus, it sometimes takes a month for them to be able to get access to all of our resources. So that's my only kind of concern right now.
I think that's an opportunity to fast track.
I also think that it's important for us to continue to grow our leaders. And so I think that our network does a really good job of that skills-focused professional development. But I think it's also important to make sure that leaders understand what their vision is and how they incorporate that in their daily practices every day.
All right, I'm going to propose a very long-term idea that but if you're going to put me in front of the board, I'm going to pitch it. So I think that we have an opportunity to really give our high school scholars more experiences and more choices. I think what limits us right now is how small our high schools are. When you only have 300 to 400 scholars, you can only offer so many electives, so many extracurriculars, and that makes it a little harder to compete with the large comprehensive high schools. I don't know how to solve all the logistic issues of it, which is why this is a very long term, but I would love to see some type of system where maybe Grand and Infinity feed together to a Grandfinity high school. And I think we could take advantage of some of the scale of that, increase more electives, gives our kids more paths to that college and career readiness mark. But I do realize that there are challenges with that. But that would be a dream of getting our high schools. I think maybe 600 students, 700 students is a sweet spot for a high school because you can offer more opportunities, but it still doesn't feel like a mega high school like a Plano or an Apple.
That's a great idea.
I don't have anything to add. What I was going to share was shared by Karen.
Okay, thank you guys. Any questions or thoughts that any of you want to share? Yes,
So
John?
why do scholars and their families choose your school? And when they don't, what are the reasons why they're choosing something else?
For me, Crescendo, we're in an awesome location. So I think one of the reasons that scholars and parents have gravitated is because of the location. I think that's a wonderful spotlight. And they stay because of our engagement. We have lots of engagement, at least 2 a month, and which is, we have parents coming in, we have kids coming in, we have lots of fun activities. I think we use our spaces well, and so I think that's why our parents continue to come.
So Crescendo is located literally off of I-30, just past Arlington, right as you enter the city of Fort Worth. It does have a really good wooded area. Do you have any thoughts on why, when a family chooses to leave or withdraw, what those reasons have been?
So far, it's been because they're moving somewhere out of state or out of our area. I think part of it was distance, because we don't have buses or anything. So that once they kind of figured everything, so that's mostly usually the reason why.
Yeah, my first instinct is to say, why not choose Uplift Readiness? So I think we're in a really unique place where a lot of our teachers have been there for years. They also have been, I have several teachers who are founding teachers who have been there. And so it may look or feel different for them, but I think that my parents love the fact that we are a growing community, but there's also some stability there, and we're just like a family. So we are considered the Gratis family.
I think having worked at a couple of campuses now, the answer really differs depending on where you are. And so what I'm looking forward to is figuring out how to individualize our plan for retention, like at a specific campus. So I actually have a meeting scheduled next week with Deborah's team to do that.
Brady probably sits in one of the most interesting cities of the cities we serve in terms of our value proposition versus what's valued in Grand Prairie. And I don't know, Brady, I think this would be really interesting going forward. Will you take just a few more minutes and share like what you saw at Hampton when folks were making choices versus in Grand Prairie?
So I spent my first 9 years in Uplift at Hampton. We really didn't have many other choices of schools around Hampton that families wanted to make, and so whenever a family's there, we're comparing what their scholar could get at Hampton versus the neighboring schools. It was just a really clear-cut choice. Grand Prairie ISD isn't as low performing as the schools that Hampton competed with, so there's some more choice there. But also, what I have found is that the Grand Prairie community, the city of Grand Prairie, is a pretty happy community, and so you have a lot of families that they may be on free and reduced lunch, but they are very happy with the quality of life that they have there. And so we have to change the way that we're marketing our campus, because at some of the other schools it's about, we're going to get your scholar to college, we're going to help them to break some of the lines of poverty that might have been there, and I don't think that there's that much pressure in Grand Prairie for that.
I think for Luna, a lot of it is looking at us as the option relative to the other neighborhood schools that their scholar may go to if they weren't with us, and just seeing that we do have a higher level of academic performance. And once scholars are with us, we hear them voice a lot about how the school just feels different. They talk about there's less fights, less incidents, that also I think make parents want to stay. Some reasons for moving, of course, sometimes if individual scholars have situations, a lot of parents, sorry, I'm speaking pretty vaguely, but we have individual kids that may have realize it's not a fit for them, and it's not a fit for everyone, and so we do have some that opt out, but the majority of our scholars do stay, and what we're seeing right now is the reason behind most of our moves is we have a lot of families that are moving further from our school. Just this week alone, we've lost 3 that have moved to Richardson, a few that have moved to Garland. And so just given where we are downtown, I think we have scholars that are more transient and where their housing is, which is leading to moves and exciting about this too.
Across the network, I would say top 2 reasons we see when families withdraw, and why we talked about this as a board, like why do we have so many withdrawals during the year, is when families do move, and because we don't transport children to and from school, and especially now with gas prices, it just becomes more expensive, and does it make sense to now drive 30 minutes when maybe before you were driving 15? Ricky?
How much crossover, so like if they move from one area, how much is coming back into the network versus going to other districts, and how many are going to other charter schools versus going to an ISD when they do move? Do you have any general metrics around that or
Well, we
not?
try, if a family is moving to see, is there an Uplift school nearby? But oftentimes, if they're literally
north.
going further out, we just don't. If they're going further east or further north, then we don't. And I would say, my guess is most of the time they're going to an ISD school, because the further they go out, they're probably not finding a charter there either.
So Karen and Katie, I don't know if you remember, but I was the CAC for Luna, so you've got a special place in my heart. Do we know how many of our current Luna students are intending to go to the new campus?
We haven't polled them.
And if they're not,
Yep.
what are they doing?
Yep.
Kind of
So-
like what you're-
So we have not done that official polling yet because they won't be exactly, they'll move next winter break, so we'll do that probably at the end of this school year to help with, do you need to be transferred internally to another Uplift school if you're out that way? But our strong guess is probably 80 to 85%, because when we did a zip code mapping of current Luna students, many of them live east. There is a group that does live south. Fortunately, we have several schools south that we could then help match families to. And that's why we think we probably will get an inflow of new students because of how much population sits right there at Mesquite where there are no charter school options. So.
And I do think parent excitement and interest in it is rising.
Yeah.
And so I think that number is going to continue to rise, which is an exciting thing for us. And we're focusing our recruitment efforts for the upcoming year and even this current year on East Dallas and even a little bit of the Mesquite area and Pleasant Grove. So we're already trying to recruit our scholars now that will definitely move with us then.
I know that the teacher shortage is much on the minds of the board and the executive committee and the administration, but I'd love to hear from you all about what is going on. You know, it's your profession. It's like, what are you seeing and how do you interpret it?
Do you mean at like the micro level at our campus or kind of higher up as a whole?
Kind of higher up as a whole. Is it like, why is the quality falling? Are people not going in? Was this caused by COVID? I'm sure it's a confluence of things, but
Take a second to
this is always my role in any conversation. Called Stone Priest at the Catholic School.
I was just going to say, like, I just simply think that there are more options out there for educators. There are more remote jobs, there's more consultancy work, and so people are just exploring. And I also feel like, you know, with the pandemic, like people are really taking a step back and reflecting on what do they want their lives to look like or feel. And so your perspective may be a little bit different.
I think educators, teachers have there's always been a gap in salary between other degreed professionals. And so the question is, if it's not, like the money's always been the gap, so something else has changed. And I think that there are some challenges that I have people very frustrated and maybe don't know the solution. So for example, my algebra teacher right now is extremely frustrated because they're very passionate about teaching high school math. The reality is the pandemic hurt math performance so much that they're now teaching 5th grade level math concepts. Well, if you signed up to be a high school math teacher, what motivates you to wake up and go to school is to teach high school math. And it is very, it's tougher to motivate yourself to teach something that you didn't initially sign up to do. And so I think the gaps maybe are taking some of the joy out of the job, especially as you get to the higher grade levels.
I think I've seen a lot thinking about my really strong teachers that left over the last year or two of, we did during the pandemic find that a lot of people enjoyed the flexibility of being able to work from home or work a more hybrid schedule, and we're one of the few places where you can't work from home when kids are at school. And so I think just with more options out there for that flexibility and the lack of flexibility just given the inherent nature of what we do, especially with my younger staff, that's been the reason for a lot of moves.
So I guess the thing is to close those gaps and maybe find incentives for them that bridge the gap of people wanting to work from home.
I also think our scholars developed bad habits during their years at home, and so we're having to work very hard to get kids acclimated to the day-to-day of school. And when you compound that on the gaps they're having academically, it's a tough job to do right now. Everybody's working extremely hard, and I think if people had hope of where the solution is, and again, I think this is a bigger than Uplift problem as a country. We have to figure out how we're going to close this gap that the pandemic created to make this a sustainable job for people.
On that point, I guess more of a statement than a question. You know, I think that individuals that are first to a solution get a better quality. I remember when I was graduating from high school, there was a big nursing crisis. And the U.S. went to the Philippines and actually got nurses. And they actually expedited the whole process of getting qualified. Have you guys looked at any other countries that are English-speaking countries that have qualified teacher base and look at figuring out how do you influence legislation to bring them over and creatively do that? Because I mean, the first that think through that will get monies from the government to do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and we know we have not specifically looked at increasing our international recruitment at all. Typically, in the K-12 space, what people have done is try to go to Spanish-speaking countries to recruit Spanish-speaking teachers to fill that need. I think the way the state's trying to do it right now is loosening teacher certification requirements to make it easier for more people to come into the profession. There's obviously pros and cons on that in terms of quality, but it's a good point, though, Ed, about the sourcing more broadly outside the country for it. Yeah, Rusty.
Also on teachers, you know, I think you and I share the experience of where our children go to school, and one of the reasons people teach at those schools is because they have a lot of freedom in what and how they teach. Now, all the schools are trying to standardize. Do you find that your faculty feel constrained by the limitations or the structures, and is that a factor in attracting and retaining teachers?
I have not found it to be something for my teachers, but I fill their buckets as soon as I start filling their buckets, as soon as I hire them, so that when I do ask them or require them to do certain things, that they're more willing to do those things. So I have not found that because I'm, requiring you to follow this Eureka script that, you're not wanting to stay on the campus, but I do ask them to let me know if there's some reason or issue or whatever it is they need to share, and then if it works best for kids, then I'm all for it. So I haven't had that be an issue.
Yeah, in fact, I feel like it's a benefit to have those structures. I think the bigger problem could potentially be of how we support our teachers and making sure that they feel confident in teaching the curriculum.
Yeah, I don't think that our top performing teachers feel like their freedom is restricted. If they want to do something that might be different than the network curriculum, they have a conversation with us. We talk through it and coach them, and then we say, we'll monitor the results. Because if we see that it's trending in the wrong direction, we're going to stop that and go back. But if we're doing something that's great for scholars, it's generally supported.
And I think our teachers across the district get a lot of kind of leeway in the way they take their units. Although the content may be the same through the IB unit planning we do, they get to design what the theme of their unit is, what scholars are exploring more broadly, and so I think that gives them freedom in a way that maybe the specific what scholars are learning doesn't.
I think the difference, right, is that the years of tenure and experience at a private school versus a urban school, especially with the pandemic, 40% of our teachers have less than 2 years experience. So it's actually part of their professional development to say, here's a vetted research-based curriculum. We're going to show you how to use it and be successful at it. And then exactly to everyone's points here, as you've demonstrated success, and you now know how to be a good teacher and a great teacher, you have a lot more creativity that you can use. But actually it's a detriment to kids if you give a rookie teacher a full innovation and jump.
I think it's important to just mention too, so nationally, there's less people choosing to major and to get certified. So like, you know, we see it with doctors and nurses, like you said before, but there are less people entering the profession, and so the pool is a lot smaller for a lot of reasons. So it's I think us as a board have to be creative about how we support you all, because like it's not going to change, right? So
In the short term.
Yeah, in the short term. But like, so how do we continue to support you all as a, you know, as you're out there, you know? And I think about the other pieces. So you brought up the urban versus kind of like even suburban or private schools, and I think about what a lot of districts are having to deal with politically right now, and the very tenuous nature of working in public schools and publicly elected boards. I think that one thing that Uplift may have from a teacher, I don't know how you market this kid, you're just stepping into a load of poo. But, you know, it's one of those things where we kind of fly under the radar as far as a lot of those political issues because of the way that we're structured, the way that we operate as a board. You know, those folks that are picking fights, right? You know, so I feel like also in a charter network and in this network, it's almost a safer place too, right? For educators to come and be able to be who they are and teach without having to get into this very political atmosphere that surrounds us, you know, in most of especially the suburban districts in our own community. So I don't know how we can capitalize on that a little bit with some teachers and say, like, so at least you have like 5% less, you know, worries from the political side of things. But, you know, I just think about that too.
Your meetings are pretty boring. There's no fights at our
Yeah.
Do you see that on any of your applicants, that they're trying to get away from the polarized political environment in some of the other independent school districts?
I have had some interviews that talk about ISDs versus charter, and they want to know the difference between the two. Because I came from Arlington ISD, so I kind of know like how to, I guess, talk about it, what the differences are. And I have had a couple kind of talk about the structures of it.
Yes.
I have a question. It's kind of two parts. So as a board member, I want to ask you, how can the board be more supportive of your teachers and retention? Because every board meeting, every other board meeting, we're talking about retention and that's just not. So how can we be more supportive? Like, think of ideas that, whether it's we come once a year and honor the teachers that have been there 5 years and 10 years and the board's there, and I don't know if that has any appeal. And my second sort of question, so my kids went to private school in the wealthy part of California, and we were still competing with other schools in California that were paying their teachers well, and so we kind of wanted to differentiate and attract some younger, more innovative teachers. And we started an investment fund that says, okay, this is your pay, but however, you know, the investment fund does, will split the proceeds depending on how many years you've been there, and obviously the longer you've been there. Either of those ideas have any appeal, or would they have any appeal to your educators, do you think?
So the investment part?
Would be if there was an opportunity for them to have some like additional financial opportunities that were performance-based, that could be more honoring their additional years of service.
So this is just my opinion. Younger teachers are not as focused on, again, this is just my opinion, of the money as much as veteran teachers. Veteran teachers are kind of looking towards, they probably have kids getting ready to go to college, looking towards retirement, so they're looking more at the monetary side. Our younger, I don't know if they're Gen Zs, they're not so much focused on money to me. It's all about their, their feelings, their personal choice. Do they feel happy? Does this place make me feel, welcomed and those kind of things? That's what I see with the younger teachers compared to my veteran teachers. So I think for our veteran teachers, that would probably be something that they would value. My younger teachers, it's all about just kind of how they feel at the moment. And
We all ride
if
a
they're
lot
happy,
of emotional waves.
Yes, yes. So that's just my personal opinion on what I've seen with the two different types of teachers.
Yeah, I think in terms of being financially competitive, Uplift has done a really great job with that and with retention bonuses and performance incentives over the past few years, and the teacher incentive allotment has done great things for that as well. And though for the board, I think about, there was a day in the spring where we gave all of our teachers handwritten cards from board members last year, and that meant a ton to our staff. And so it wasn't small, I know it took y'all a ton of time to write all of those, and we're very thankful, but just tokens of appreciations or a thank you is sometimes the biggest thing that's gonna make a difference in their day, their week, their quarter, because they may not always be hearing that from their scholars or parents, but to know that other people outside of just the campus level appreciate them can mean a lot.
So Pilar and Christine chair the board school engagement committee, which includes teacher appreciation on behalf of the board. So that's great. And any other ideas you all would give them on how the board can help make your teachers feel appreciated?
It doesn't have to be today.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
get in touch with Yasmin and say, we'd love to hear those songs.
Great. Do you have any that you want to share immediately, or you're going to send me a list?
I'll send you a
You'll
list.
send me a list, and then I'll forward it to you. We'll have a group email.
One
Sounds
thing
great.
I just want to mention too, so I think it'd be good for this board to also understand the retirement system, the TRS system, because it's a lot different than our, how we do our retirement as board members. And I think that the TRS system, I'm married to somebody who is in the TRS system, it is very discouraging as far as like planning for retirement. He's been in the 15 years in the industry, and he has like 38 more to reach full kind of compensation for retirement. So he's like, I'm gonna be like 68 years old when I finally get to retire. So I think that, to your point about like other types of investments, other incentives and things like that, I just think it'd be good for this board to understand how teachers actually, their mindset when it comes to retirement and to some of those other opportunities. So maybe at a future board meeting, we can refresh on TRS.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. John, I know you wanted to share something.
You touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask what campus or school culture means to you. So especially when you've moved campuses or you see other campuses, or you come to in a new leadership position and you're assessing it and you want to improve it. What are the things you look for? How do you change it? What do you think matters?
That's a loaded question.
Well, you probably were the best person to start, because you literally stepped to do a complete turnaround, and maybe you could share what it's like to start with school with strong culture.
To me, it's how I feel when I get ready to come to work every day. Am I happy to see my kids? Am I excited to see my teachers? And I think that it's also even more so important when you come to visit our campus, and I want you guys to, but when you come to visit our campus, what is the feeling that you get as soon as you walk into the room or the building? What I hope that you would see and feel is that you feel encouraged, you feel loved and appreciated. And that takes a lot of time and effort. I think that is something that we have to constantly work at daily. And once you get to that point, what are you going to do to ensure that it continues?
Do you all have any other thoughts on
I
what
think
culture looks
if
like
you're
for you?
if you're a new principal and you come into a school, I think a new person might try to focus on the scholar culture, and I think that that's the opposite of what you should do. You need to focus on the adult culture and establishing really strong classrooms, because if your adult culture is strong and their classrooms are great, that's what is going to transform the scholar culture. And so I think that that's the thing that I've learned over the years, is that if you're constantly fighting the fires that the scholars are creating, you're never going to get your school to the point you want it to be. Create great classrooms with happy teachers, and the scholar culture takes care of itself.
Yeah. Happy teachers, I say it all the time, happy teachers make happy kids.
And so anytime my teachers ask for any supplies, resources, I just get it for them. Especially if I know it's going to translate to them using it in the classroom. I just get whatever they need. I feed them. They like to eat. I mean, not like they like to eat, but they do like to. They do.
They do. If you think about it, right? Like they're covering lunch duty.
Yes,
They're like,
yes.
you know, actually having an opportunity to eat before 3:30 is,
Yeah.
it's
So
important.
I do try to, and my love language is gifts, so I do like try to give them at least one gift a month, even though it could be a note card, it could be lunch, it could be a t-shirt, it could be anything, but I do try to give them something every month. It could be the gift of time. It's just different things, just to help them feel like I do appreciate them, and I know the work is hard, I know the struggle is real, but I'm here for you. And I do have I mean, I guess everybody has an open door policy where, you know, they can come speak with me. If they have concerns or comments, I'm there to support them with parents as well. And so we just try to make them feel appreciated as much as we can.
Yeah, I think Shermanda's question was really key. How do you feel when you're coming to work? And the other question I'd add is, do we have a shared reason that we're coming to work?
Just a follow-up to that question, your answers. Do you feel like that happy teacher model, when you get to where you are, do you feel like it actually helps in the retention? In other words, if you look at people who have left, are they the ones that surprised that they're happy and they like it, they love working in the team, but they still choose to leave, or are they the ones that were your problem teachers that never fit in? So any comments on that?
I can provide you the example of Gratis. So we had 4 teachers to leave, to transition from last year to this year. 2 were performance improvement plans, which happens, and then the other 2 moved out of state. And so I think, you know, if you live off of that motto of like making sure that your teachers are happy, they're going to stay.
And so for me, I had 2 that left, and they moved. They weren't near our area, so they just moved to a different location, so it was just too far to drive.
So I attended in public ISD over near Fort Worth. It was a pretty mediocre ISD, but the elementary school that I went to it in its first year of opening, and it opened as an A-rated, like top 10 elementary school in the state. And I found out as I got older that the reason for that is the principal they hired had an extremely loyal following of great teachers. And so she was able to open that school with 20+ teachers that were excellent, but it was that loyalty to the principal that really allowed that to happen. And so I think when you're looking at teacher retention and you're looking at your staff culture, the first person you have to look to is the principal of the school, because they're going to be the ones that ultimately make a teacher feel like they're valued, that they are making contributions, that they're a great teacher, and that they drive the culture.
And I also find my teachers that feel the most satisfied and also help to build a positive culture are the ones that return year over year.
Well, on behalf of the board and the executive team, thank you so much again for being here with us today and for sharing your thoughts, and most importantly, for being the culture shapers on each of your campuses. So thank you so much. All right, I'm going to give the board a 3-minute stretch break if you need it to throw things away, refresh any water. The bathrooms are right there, and then we will get back going again. But we are trying to incorporate movement in our work and Uplift. Thanks, guys.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. We're going to start up again, please, everyone, in the interest of time. Thank you.
Do I need the mic, or can y'all hear me okay?
We will hear from Yasmin for CEO remarks and executive summary.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Wonderful. So what I hope to do in this just short bit of time that I have with you is to just set the context for the rest of the afternoon in terms of what are we focused on as an organization? What are the headwinds that we are seeing? What are the opportunities that we are excited about? I want to just openly name that if we are going to be completely real in this meeting about the challenges and the complexities that we are facing, and of course, as we've already talked about on the school year panel, that the entire public K-12 sector is facing across the country. But because you need to know the complexities and the challenges that we are facing, because you are our core thought partners as we do this work. But at the same time, I hope you also will walk away with the very clear wins and positive opportunities that we have in front of us. This executive team, our managing directors and our school leaders, we've kind of gotten used to operating in complexity and a challenging environment. So like our heads aren't in the sand, we aren't running around with our heads cut off or just, you know, in a complete panic. Like we are leading with confidence and optimism as we navigate this work. And so I hope you see that over the course of today, that we understand what the challenges are, but we also feel good about the plan that we have and are excited to continue to execute towards that. And you know, I know that over the past 2 years, there are peers I've talked to who've said, we cannot do anything new right now, right? Like we just need to like, just stay stable and do, you know, what we're doing. And we know if we're gonna come out of, you know, this very unique time that we've faced as schools, we have to be innovating. We have to be thinking about how do we create even stronger culture for our staff, for our kids, raise academic performance. And so I think what you're gonna also see is like, where are we selectively choosing to innovate right now as well, because that's equally important for us. So that's just a little bit of context of how we'll spend our day. So my mission moment for you is we opened a new physical learning space and didn't really tell you. You're used to big schools. We have a mobile classroom that is launching this school year, and you will get a chance to step inside Uplift Voyager, which is the name of this learning space, this evening when you're over at Community Brewery. So extra motivation to go over there at 5 o'clock. You and if your significant other is joining, will be able to step inside and check it out. This is our social emotional learning mobile classroom. And so it will move around the network, and teachers will be able to block a spot for their classroom to be able to go and experience it. You can't really see it on this side. Well, you can see the inside of it, but there's also an overhang that comes out, and so on nice days, we can put yoga mats out, and kids can do a mix of things inside the bus and outside. And it's just another way of creating more opportunities for social emotional learning, whether that's movement, meditation, etc. So we're really excited about it. We will also take this out to recruitment events when we're getting to know families. Staff could use it after school for any well-being activities as well. So we're going to see how the first one goes, and you know, if there's a need to expand Uplift Voyager 1, 2, 3. But this is an example of innovation that I was just talking about a minute ago. We totally stole the idea from the Thoreau Museum and their tech truck, which has been a wild success, and we hope that Uplift Voyager is as well. Dr. Gasco will share more about this when he is with us in December, our Chief Wellbeing Officer. So I want to remind everyone of the strategic work that we did pre the pandemic around what are the core planks that we want to work on. This has stayed pretty true, right? We are continuing to innovate and flesh out strategies within these planks. But for the most part, these are still the big things. And you will see that in the vision statement that I'll show next. You'll also see it how it ties to our goals. So if you think about these 4 rectangles here in the middle core part of the house, right? The first 2 are all around academic achievement, and it's all the stuff we've been talking about, right? How are we the best district for kids, which we call the A-rated district? Inside that box, it talks about all kids have to be able to perform and be successful, and we've talked about that as well. You see it in our goals. We want to make sure all kids are successful and we reduce any gaps between student groups. The second is around college readiness, which of course we've talked about as well. That's like the bread and butter of Uplift, and trying to make sure that kids are prepared to go off to college and career. The third plank there is making sure that we are the top choice for families, right? This is all of our recruitment efforts and our retention efforts to hold on to our families. And then the last plank here is around our people and making sure we are creating compelling cultures, that we are the top choice for teachers, and that we hold on to our teachers and our staff that we have. So none of those things have changed. We are just getting refining how we best execute along those objectives. You can see in the next long kind of foundation of the house here, it says strong sense of belonging and providing an experience that resonates with families. Again, when you look at our vision and our goals, you'll see us intentionally talking about scholar culture and what does it mean for every child to actually feel like our school is a home for them and that they are valued for their own individuality. And lastly, at the very bottom of the house, this has become obviously something we've had to lean in on more during the pandemic. It's just our overall fiscal health and making sure that we have a financially sustainable model. So that is something that we are obviously keeping front and center as well. So our vision statement, which is our depiction of where we want to be 3 to 5 years from now to complement our mission statement, we worked on this with a group of senior staff across the organization this past year, is that our communities choose Uplift for being a high-achieving IB network of schools that ensure that our scholars thrive as individuals, take pride in their own and other cultures, and are critical thinkers prepared for college and career. Right? So if you go back to this house, it's there. We want to be high achieving. We want to prepare them for college and career. We want to make sure that they feel a strong sense of belonging. And the third plank of there, that we want families to choose us. So that is all reflected here in this vision statement. When you look at our goals, you can see how they play out as well. So these are network goals for this year that all of our team is aligned to hit. So the first one is that we hit 50% meets levels on STAR in math and reading. And again, that we are watching and making sure every student group is being successful. That through the Gallup poll through Rhythm on the second one, which is our scholar culture survey that we literally give twice a week across the network, that kids feel valued, respected, and challenged, right? It goes back to the vision statement, back to this goal around sense of belonging. The green box here is our staff culture goal. This is tied to Gallup, which is a survey that for-profits and nonprofits use. And we specifically picked from Gallup the first 2 questions, which are the foundational things that an employee needs. Do I know what's expected of me, and do I have the resources to do my job? We have historically tracked overall Gallup, like, how do people feel about being an Uplift? And what we decided to do is, because those first 2 questions are so critical on whether or not an employee feels set up for success, we said, what if we took 2 questions and just went super deep? So we brought Gallup out. Our school leaders were trained on how do you think about these questions, how do you engage your teachers about these topics. And so we are in our first Gallup administration right now for this school year. So when we get back in December, we'll be able to share with you what was the starting point for the year. And we're all paying close attention to questions 1 and 2 to see how they grow over the year. And then 40% of our scholars are college and career ready. That's measured by a different test in each of freshman through senior year in high school, includes things like the ACT. But we know that college and career readiness actually starts in primary school, right? Like, everyone should be hustling in the 9th grade. And that's why I loved hearing Karen Aldridge from Uplift Crescendo share. I'm most excited about that my national norm data is telling me I've got a bunch of kids in quintile 4 and 5. Now we have to hold them there. Or when you heard Tremanda say, my teachers, like, for the past few years at Gratis, have had to be closing gaps. Now they've closed them. They have to teach differently to keep accelerating kids. that's awesome to hear primary school leaders saying, I know I can help us get to this when we get to high school. We call these 3 goals on the right our monitor and maintain goals because regardless of the year, like we always have to do these things. And so we need to make sure our kids are coming to school every day. They cannot learn if they are not with us. We need to hold on to our staff. And 100% full house means we need to deliver on being the best choice in our communities. Our schools need to be full because families have picked us and families want to stay with us. So just as context for the board, every day we send out an email to our school leaders with links, and it shows what was your attendance for the day by grade level so they can be closely monitoring it. What is your current enrollment and how many withdrawals have you had? That way they can be active, proactive about it, and we can get ahead of anything that's happening. Yeah, please.
The first on the left, 50% meets, that honestly just sounds low to me.
Thank you. Yep. No, yes, that is a great question. So, first of all, that would be incredibly high comparatively for an urban school at the local or state level. So on STAR, when the kids take it, there's passes, which is called approaches. So you want that number to be high. Then there's meets, which says they're performing at grade level, and then masters, which is they're performing above grade level. And so it is, so for all of our schools to be hitting 50% of their kids in that middle or above section would put us well positioned to be an A district.
And that's national number?
No, this is state level. It's based on our state assessment. So it actually is a pretty rigorous goal. I don't disagree that we should want, 75% of our kids to be at grade level, but that's not the place where we're at or that the state is at right now. When you look at urban schools versus comparing to suburban schools. So you'd probably see this number at 70% at a Highland Park ISD, right? But you wouldn't see it 80 or 90%, but you'd see it higher than the 50. Any other questions on this one? Feel free to just pause me along the way, and I'm happy to take questions at the end too. So where am I spending my time, right? Because there's lots of places I could be spending my time right now. One of them is the overall fiscal health. This is something, again, I'm sure you all are reading about or hearing about on the news. A group of us passed around an article. There's a national dip in enrollment in public schools of 9% right now, as families are picking homeschooling or private schools or micro schools, all the other different school choices that have come out of the pandemic. And so I'm making sure, are we at full house and are our kids coming to school? Even right now, our attendance is at 94%. That means of the kids enrolled in our schools, 94% of kids come every day. Before the pandemic, 96% of kids came every day to school. That's why we budgeted at 96%. And if we were 0.1% off, it was literally a crisis. Like, what is going on? Why are we missing these kids? And we've been just hovering at 94. And what I just don't know until we go through the full year is 94 the new norm? And that's what we have to plan for. Or will we start seeing a rebound back to pre-pandemic? And so it's just unclear. So these things matter because all of the supports we have to deliver our mission and help kids are based on our financial model. So we need to make sure that we deliver there. That goes into org sustainability, state advocacy. This is an important session for us because the state has held funding flat for this school year. The state budgets every 2 years. That's how the legislative cycle works in Texas. You get a 2-year budget, so that's very normal. But during this year, while their funding stayed flat, we had incredible wage pressure. Other industries did too. And incredible inflationary pressure in non-wage costs. But we have no increase in state revenue to offset it. So fortunately, we had ESSER. We had federal funding that plugs the gap of our budget. Now, everyone said at the start of this federal funding, right, it's just for supplemental. Don't expect it to continue. Don't expect the state to like step in. It all has to go towards things that you could immediately stop doing. I don't think anyone anticipated the need to grow wages as much as we've had to staff our schools and even the other positions that are around. So our number one advocacy issue will be, what is the state's increase in per student funding for the next 2 years? As we know, ESSER will wind down in the 23-24 school year. That is leading into me working with our finance team on what are those pro forma scenarios for our financials over the next 3 to 5 years. What does it mean when we have X increase in state funding or Y increase in state funding? What does the plug need to be with philanthropic funds? What do we need to budget attendance at or enrollment at? Building out Deborah's team is super important because we want to make sure that our programs, that are our signature programs, Road to College and Career, our well-being programs that make Uplift a truly special and differentiated place, get to stay. And right now, you cannot cover those programs on public dollars alone. In terms of our overall value proposition, we want to really have be at a place where we are thriving on college readiness levels across primary, middle, and high school. And that opens up more opportunities for our high school kids as they leave us, and really figuring out what is the value proposition for our high schools as we try to do this dance between college and a growing interest in career, but careers that are meaningful careers where kids can earn a living wage and have access to health care. And that is tricky, and there's a lot of noise that I'll speak to in a minute in the high school space right now. Families have far more options than they had 5 or 8 years ago, and there's not a lot of due diligence I've found by families or even community members to get underneath those options. Many sitting in traditional ISDs to say, is this really a high quality option for what a child should be doing, and are we, in some situations, children have to be academically qualified to go into career programs that then don't put them on a college pathway. And so it's tricky to navigate immediate needs of families and also investment in long-term trajectories that provide them the most economic mobility as they go forward. And then just broadly supporting our executive team and reinforcing practices. When 40% of your staff has been at your organization for less than 2 years, you can't actually say, like, remember 3 years ago when we trained you on that or when we rolled this out? Like, you are constantly training, constantly onboarding, and you're constantly monitoring for consistent execution. And so I feel like, just one of my roles when I'm on campuses can be knowing, okay, what does Remy care the most about that's happening in classrooms? And when I'm in there, like, I'm watching for that too and using my time with leaders to just reinforce those same messages. So as I think about the strengths we have to navigate through the headwinds, we do have some great strikes in place. The first is that 50% goal that we just talked about on meets and masters. Like, every school leader in the network, they know that. It's like not a surprise to them. Remy and Mike and Priscilla and our managing directors have all sat with our school leaders and walked them through their data in like meaningful detail. And everyone knows, like, this is what we're shooting for around academic excellence. A gift from the Hammond Foundation towards expanding career pathways is really a neat opportunity for us to innovate around career in a way that's authentic for Uplift. If we don't have to copycat what an ISD is doing, we can think about career pathways in a way that is still rigorous and leads to that ultimate goal of our families and kids having economic mobility. We're going to talk more about the Hammond gift in our December meeting. Overall organization culture continues to be a strength for us, even in these times where we're seeing such issues with retention. I think part of why it's a strength is because at Uplift we get that culture has to be nurtured. Like, you actually have to work on your culture. You can't just hope it happens. And even hopefully you all seeing our goal around pinpointing 2 aspects of Gallup that we're going really hard on just shows the thoughtfulness that we are trying to have to be good stewards of culture. From an innovation front, on the people side, we have a pilot that Anna spoke about in Fort Worth, and she'll mention again in her time today, called Opportunity Culture. It's a national program that was brought to Fort Worth first before Dallas. So our Fort Worth schools are piloting it. It's an opportunity for some differentiated and more creative teacher pathways that allow teachers to play a leader role for a portion of their day, but not have to leave the classroom, so they can expand their impact and get additional compensation for it. The teacher incentive allotment is the state's pay for performance program and designation system for the best teachers in the state. We have the 2nd highest number of designated TIA teachers behind DISD, and obviously DISD is 5 times the size of us. So we're continuing to innovate there. And then I think we have the right overall aspects of our well-being strategy that is quite differentiated and robust. Lots of people coming out of the pandemic will talk to you about SEL. I am not talking about glitter balls in classrooms for kids to shake if they are feeling dysregulated. I am talking about purposeful, research-based curriculum that's delivered multiple times a week, surveys to assess children and how they're feeling in the moment with resources of how to share that, a robust counseling program, student support specialists who are additional staff on the campus to work with caseloads of children who need extra support and an extra friend to guide them in making good choices throughout the day, including staff well-being efforts that also are out there. Do we still have mindset issues that we have to win over of teachers who are like, when you ask me to do a meditation exercise, I could be teaching them math? Yes, that's part of the monitoring and consistent execution, but the overall framework for well-being and the staffing is there in place. So lastly, as we leverage these opportunities that we have and these strengths, what are the headwinds we just need to be mindful of? And you can see some of these headwinds and challenges here. We've talked about enrollment already, right? But that's where I believe if we accomplish what we're trying to on scholar culture and academic achievement, it just strengthens our case of why families should be choosing us there. It kind of goes with navigating the noisy high school space. We actually know in high schools it's probably not enough to be the best academic school. We do have some communities where we have to get our messaging correct, where we're not winning the messaging war on that alone, of what else are families looking for and what other pathways are they looking for so we can meet those needs, but again, still do it in a high quality way. Staffing shortages, our team talked about it, and I think Katie talked about it, the burnout it causes on the staff that are still here because they have more to do. It also makes it harder to achieve some of our academic goals because we're having to ramp up a lot of new teachers very quickly. Our skill set as an organization of how we onboard and train new teachers, which I think we're pretty good at, we have to be exemplars at if we are going to make sure that a very different staffing time allows us to keep our goals. We talked about state funding, that is the unknown, right? Session starts in January. If it goes traditionally in May and doesn't have a special session, we will know a lot more. We are going to need your help when asked to appropriately lift your voices. And then this inconsistent classroom execution, we're seeing that right now. Again, we are seeing it because we have so many new people, right? And just like kids developed some bad habits during the pandemic, our teachers also have the ability to pause some of the things that are hard that they know work for kids. So monitoring and consistent execution is a super big deal. So where I need y'all's support is your thought partnership, right? As we navigate these challenges, we need your voice, where we ask for it specifically on different advocacy items. We need your voice on why individuals should philanthropically give to Uplift. And we have some talking points, and Deborah will direct you to those resources later. And we need your participation on our board committees, because the work of the board in granularity happens in the committees, right? And you'll see in the front of your binder when you opened it up, you have a board committee interest form. If you want to add a committee you're on, or even share with us, hey, down the road, I'd like to learn more about this committee. When Dawn visits with the board about governance at the end of today's time, you'll have an opportunity to share those things with us. But we are inviting you to get more into the weeds with us, which is what happens in our committees, so that way we can address these headwinds and these opportunities together. So I realized when I looked at this slide, I was like, oh my gosh, like women really do rule the world in Uplift, but that's not true because we do have very strong male colleagues on our executive team. But you will be hearing from the females on the executive team today. So Remy will go deep on our strategies around academic achievement and college readiness, and we'll then talk about adult culture and staffing. And then Deborah will talk about advocacy and development, fundraising activities to make sure that our schools are appropriately resourced. So we are going to deep dive in each of these topics today. As you saw from your pre-read and what's in your binder is you have tabs for Remy and Anne's sections. You will see you have their presentation deck and then their data deck. And so they will direct you to when there's a specific data slide they want you to flip to. And that way we can really focus our conversations on the key takeaways. We hope you'll take notes, think about questions that you have, but hopefully all the resources that you need for this afternoon, they are in your binders. Yes, Colin.
So, Yasmin, thanks to your concise presentation, we're 4 minutes ahead, and I
Yes.
just wanted to see, before we go to Dr. Washington, whether any board members have any questions for you beyond what they've already asked.
Perfect.
I have one.
Yes, Rusty.
Not a question at all. I have to tell you that the materials are magnificently organized, presented. You're very good at directing us to what we should look at. It was very effective. So to all of you who participated in creating this, kudos.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate that. So, yes, Dawn.
Talking about the aspects of well-being and strategies, and then it was really going back as well to talking about happy teachers.
Yeah.
So just as a balance, how are we giving them, or what strategies are we giving them for resiliency and perseverance and, you know, the grungy kind of things that you learn through time, but we kind of don't have the time. Instead of saying, happy is great, we can't always afford to be happy. I mean, so, like, are we giving them strategies and not just leaving them out there to say, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. And so on the adult side, a couple of things that we do.
Only the adult side, sorry.
I know on the adult side, yes. So I'll just give a few things and then hand to Remy to build.
Right.
So one, I think that's where the strength of our school leaders come in. I mean, our school leaders are very authentic when they said they deal, especially with our young staff, with a lot of feelings, right?
Yeah.
So they are personally executive coaching teachers when they are struggling with something that happened. That is like first and foremost the thing. Then what Dr. Gasco started doing last year is he would like pick a day and just go to a campus, say, I'm here, open office hours, right? Like, you want to come by and see me and one-on-one problem solve with something, I will help you think through it. So I think the way we think about helping them with resiliency is we're going to coach you through that problem. We are going to model something if you need it. If you need a resource that's holding you back, if you need to go see a teacher, you know, at another school or in your building, like, how do we help equip you to be able to handle through it? Remy, would you add anything?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add, and I'll probably try to touch on this in my presentation, is like creating the time for them to process everything. So I think our leaders have done a really good job, like despite the vacancies and despite coverage, like
where can you find that extra 15, 20, 30 minutes for a teacher to decompress, process, and or plan with a more experienced teacher, and or get support from someone centrally who's like the expert in the content? I think that has helped people feel a little less stressed in terms of, I've got some confidence that I just got built up in this 30 minutes, as opposed to the, 15-minute drive home crying about what happened today.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then just to follow up quickly, the mentor part of it, I think we talked about that several months ago. Has that been happening?
So there are a set of teachers in the network so mentorship actually looks a couple of different ways. It's a little bit of a longer answer because we have a formal mentor program at Uplift, and then some of our teachers are part of teacher prep programs, residency programs where they have a mentor through that program. And then we have opportunity culture in the Fort Worth schools where literally that is almost like a teacher mentor program where you have an exemplar teacher and they are responsible for mentoring the teachers in their grade level or subject area. So it doesn't take one flavor.
That's great. Thank you.
John, did you have something? Are you sure? Okay.
That's
Great.
an interesting label, happy, right? I mean,
well, yes. I think it's more of the colloquial, like, saying that has existed for a long time in the education space. I don't really think, like, our leaders don't mean happy at the sake of everything else, but what we do want is for our teachers to find joy in the classroom. That is super important, right? Because when they are enjoying the lesson they're teaching and the discourse with their kids, the kids can absolutely feel that, and then when a behavior issue happens, they're in a centered place to address it productively. If they are already stressed out and a child acts out, they're probably honestly not bringing their best selves, like us as parents, if we're stressed out, to addressing that situation in the moment. So I would probably swap happy now, in having gone through the past few years, to be emotionally centered. It's probably a better term, but it doesn't sound as quaint. I'm sorry, Brittany.
No, it's fine.
Okay, James.
Yasmin, I just wanted to compliment you. So I'm the proud parent of 4 Uplift scholars. I have high school, middle school, and primary school scholars right now. We're spread out. And as I go to my kids' campus, as well as go to other campuses for extracurricular activities, system-wide, things are well. And part of the reason why they're well is, I wanted to give you this compliment earlier when you had the 4 directors up here. A lot of it is because we're very blessed as a board to have you as a businesswoman who works for a nonprofit now. And the way that you do this, again, the compliment about the materials and your leadership, and like just listening to these 4 directors up here and the way that they're dealing with things. They care about recruitment, they care about families, they care about education, they care about people. I just wanted to let you know that you're just doing a great job.
No, thank you very much.
And this is as the chair of our advocacy committee, Uplift education is a really easy thing to sell to our folks in state government who are very important to us because we are a public charter school. This is an easy thing to sell, and a lot of it's because of your sustained leadership over the years. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We have an incredible team. Okay, I'm passing it.
All right. Thank you so much, Yasmin. We'll now hear from Dr. Remy Washington for our academic update.
I'm gonna go grab an iced tea. Look forward to your presentation, of course.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like my academic update is done already with the school leaders. They like stole my thunder, but I'll try to fill in a few pieces that they didn't add. Yasmin set me up pretty well to like. Where am I pointing? It should go. Did I do that?
I broke the clicker, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I can start with what I recall. So,
One of the things I'm going to talk about, and Yasmin said it so well because the title of my presentation is about like how do we become an A-rated district, but really the A rating is kind of like just a quick tagline of saying how do we become the most desired schools in our communities. And a lot of the work around enrollment really stems from how do we create great experiences for kids, but more importantly, how do we ensure their academics are top-notch. And so I want to give you just like a really good high-level executive summary. So in case somewhere in the middle, like you drift off for me, I'm going to hit the top points right now in terms of things you got to take away from today's presentation. The first is like how well we did last year. Like over 70% of our schools in the network were rated an A or B. That's a great accomplishment after the several years that we've gone through. And so that's like a huge takeaway and like a testament to all the work of the people in the back and the school leaders that we have and the teachers. One of the things about the ratings is that we know that our school ratings were inflated last year because most districts across the country, because the year before, 2021, was not a good year for most students, benefited from the growth. And so part of accountability ratings is not only achievement, but it's also growth. And so last month when I shared the academic update in terms of letter grades, it was like, oh, everyone's a B. Everyone benefited from large amounts of growth, which is great. But we know that over the next several years, we probably will not see that huge growth that we saw in this prior school year. But really what sticks out about us as a network is really our student achievement of currently where we are compared to other ISDs. Like our student achievement for every ISD that's in North Texas is much higher than all the rest, and we'll look at that today as we go through today's presentation. So we did well last year compared to the year prior, and we're definitely still on track to become an A-rated district. We really had to think deeply after looking through that huge data packet about what does all this mean? Like what is it going to take for us to become an A-rated district? There are three things that we have to do. The first is drive up the achievement. When Pilar was like 50% doesn't seem high enough, we're together. No, because that's not where we want to be. That'll get us to an A, but we have aspirations beyond 50%. But the one thing we have to drive up this next year is our student achievement altogether. The second is around closing the performance gaps. We want to be a high-performing network of schools for every single student that we serve. And so we have to look really deeply at how is every student group performing, how are we raising the level of achievement for every single group, but shrinking the gaps in performance in between each group. And then lastly, we haven't spent tons of time talking about this probably in the last several months, but really about our college readiness rates as a network. Typically, across the country, college readiness is measured by a college admissions assessment. And so we'll talk about how our performance in the past has been very promising, but we're seeing a declining trend in our college readiness rates. And so we know we have to have an uptick in those college readiness assessment rates as well as our diploma program assessment pass rates as well. So how are we actually going to do this? There are three things. I'm not sure if the leader said all of these three things, so we'll talk about that in terms of where they are and prioritizing all these things. But the first thing that pointed out, that jumped out to us is how as a network can we systematically ensure that every scholar group is getting the attention that they deserve. One way to do that is actually developing really quick, small assessments, but looking at that data consistently. We'll talk a little bit about some challenges that we had in doing that, but talk about how we've been able to do a lot more of that this year, and we're seeing the impact of this quick response to data cycles. The second is around implementing the network curriculum. So it might have been Yasmin, but some of the leaders mentioned this, but getting our teachers to leverage their curriculum has been a little bit easier in the last current years because people have been looking for where's my resource and support to do this work. But making sure that implementation is done well and with fidelity is what we have to ensure happens. Everyone's a creative human being and we love to honor that, but we've got to make sure that kids are getting what they need. It's on grade level and it's appropriate to meet the standards for the corresponding grade level. And the last information is just providing that planning time that teachers need and the professional development. We've talked about the teacher shortage, we've talked about getting new teachers. Well, they've got to be trained, and so we've got to be really intentional about how do we provide more planning and preparation for our teachers and our leaders to do this work. Those are like our big three things that we're anchoring our supports on this year. we've got some challenges that we'll talk about a little bit today. But I do want to just name up front that this is where I could use your support, right? Becoming an A-rated district is one thing. Remaining an A district is a whole other thing. And so I really need help from the board in thinking about where are just some examples where we've seen people replicate at scale, right? So we have schools that range from 300 students in primary to 1,000, almost 1,000 students. And so some systems that work at a school of 300 students may not work at a school of 1,000. That leads to some variance in performance across the network. I would love to hear anyone who has expertise or knows companies that have been able to replicate a similar model at scale or systems at scale to help us think about how do we develop that as a network. A second option, a second thing I can use your help with is just, the college space is changing every single day. The college admissions exams are not. And so our work has been cut out for us in terms of how do we keep students motivated to perform well and to get prepared for these assessments. And also every single college admissions preparation program is not created the same. And so if you know some that have really good impact and execution and can do things across multiple schools, would love to know of any organizations that you guys may be connected to. And the last one is really about, similar to number one, when we have a model, we're an IB network of schools, but how do we make sure that that is implemented with consistency across all 45 schools? So anyone, any businesses, any examples that you guys may have where people have been able to replicate a same model in multiple places, and I would say people feel happy, but people feel cared for and are very productive. Would love to have any, if you guys could share any of those examples with me. So those are all of the things that we'll talk about today. I will start us in talking about where our progress, what's our progress toward our 5-year goals. With the house that Yasmin mentioned, we had some goals in there. So we'll talk about where we are today. The second is what's it actually going to take to improve scholar achievement. So what's happening right now, and what are things that we're going to have to do. And lastly, I'm going to talk about so far how it's going. What are some of the complexities that we've had to face, and what are some things that we've seen evidence of good work and good impact so far in the school year. So there's a lot of words here, but I can go through the 3 things from the house diagram in terms of letting you know where our progress, what's our progress. Our goal, was it 2 years ago when we made this plan? So this is the 3rd year? 4 years ago, we were creating
Short the pandemic.
Sorry.
It's like PTSD.
Like it's just yesterday, no, but we set out to be an A-rated district then, right? We said our goal was 91. Last year we still remained to be a district at 86, so we're still where we were. We're about where we were before the pandemic started, if my timing is correct. The second was about reducing the variability in campus. So we talked a little bit about just campus performance often varies across the network. And so we've worked really hard to close some of those performance gaps between our campuses. So we've made some progress where 27 out of the 43 schools are rated higher than peer school districts or peer schools in their neighborhoods. And so we obviously want that number to be 43 out of 43, or soon to be 45 out of 45. I know our goal is 43, but 43 out of 45, but we are making progress. Why that 45 number is different is because we have 2 high schools that are currently, with the state, they are grouped with their middle school. They count as a secondary campus. So by the time we hit year 5, they will have their own campus number. That's why the denominator is a little bit different there. So 27 out of 43 schools are above their peer districts. We also set a goal around equitability and outcomes for students, and we were targeting our African American and our emerging bilingual population. And last year, 32% of our African American scholars scored meets, and 27% of our emerging bilingual scholars scored meets on STAR or STAR ESC. Those numbers you can see in the data. I put the slides there at the bottom for if you want to reference those slides. Those are up from last year. I think it's about 10% higher than last year's performance. We took a bit of a dip from the original school year that we started this plan, but they jumped up about 10% for our African American scholars and about 15% for our emerging bilingual scholars. So we're moving in the right direction to help us reach that goal.
Remy, when are these STAR scores are from when?
The ones I'm referencing right now, this is from last school year.
What time of last school?
The end of the school year, so for spring of 2022. I don't even know the year we're in right now.
And
So far,
the comparison to peer district schools, I assume that doesn't mean the whole district, I guess, that means
The neighborhood school
the most
closest,
Yes.
like literally the
Closest.
closest geographic
Closest to.
school to our school.
Socioeconomically similar.
Individual school by school comparison.
Can you remind me, we talked about this like I think last time, but the meets includes the
Masters,
the masters
one
as well,
above.
correct?
Yes. So that's where we are for our 5-year academic goals in terms of progress that we made last year. I'll just show this because I think I did not do a really good job articulating this at our last board meeting. I got asked the question, like, I thought we were different from some of the other, doing much better than the other districts. Well, when looking at the overall rating, we look very similar. But when you kind of pull back the layers of the onion and look at what to me is the most important domain, domain 1, which is about scholar achievement, you can see that we outperform our peer districts by a lot in terms of our overall scholar achievement, right? We still need to drive it up to become an A district. But where we currently sit right now is far ahead of our peers when it comes to overall student achievement. And that's something that I think our district should be really proud of because we've held this like competitive advantage for a very long time.
What's the definition, sorry, of scholarship achievement?
Scholar achievement?
Is that improvement from?
Their actual STAR score. So domain 1 is what the kids' like true score was, and then domain 2 that feeds into the overall rating is like the growth. So maybe a child failed, but this next year didn't fail as badly. It counts as growth. And so then on Remy's previous slide, that overall rating is factoring in how well the kids did and how much they grew. So you're seeing the lift of growth in the left-hand side, and on the right, you're just truly seeing like how did the kids do.
You got it.
And Remy,
Yes.
obviously our philanthropic community was for the comparison of some of the schools in the city. So forward, where would be that comparison? Not by Uplift education overall, but the school specific to forward. So that 81.
For this number, I would have to get that, compute that for us to be able to get that number, but I can get that for us.
Because you know our comparisons
Oh,
are
absolutely.
out.
Yes.
So look at the schools in the area. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is a really nitpicky question, but, you know, again, people are looking at this and they're comparing, say, what DISD is relative to these schools. And there are several things that have traditionally been leading places for Upland, SEL being one of them. Many of these school districts are also doing authentic SEL. How do you position that as well? You don't have to answer this now. It may be that there's a much better time and place in your presentation to talk about it. But, you know, again, trying to understand what do we bring to the table is our advantage.
Yeah, so it's probably not a good place. I'm going to try to answer it now, but we can probably come back to it if I've got a little bit more time at the end. I think what Yasmin shared earlier is about we're learning that there are different flavors of well-being programs and SEL programs. For us, we're working at it, like I think pretty diligently about what are we learning so far. I think what we've learned is having a comprehensive program around our advisory program and having curriculum that teachers can leverage just helps with implementation, right? I think some school districts do have advisory and have curriculum, but we've been intentional about going back and getting information. How does this work? What more do you need? What adjustments do we need to make with students? And so I think like from a implementation standpoint, I think we've been very research oriented in terms of what's working, what's not, let's try something different. I think what also sets us apart, and this is going to be hard for us to actually say in a few words. That's why I love having Deborah and Yasmin to work with. But our IB program, some of the core tenets of IB are grounded in SEL. And so what John and I have been really working hard to do is figure out how do we bring those two things together, so that is something that we see in all of our work in every single classroom throughout the entire day. And I think that if we're able to, one, get that done and articulate it, I think that would be something that definitely sets us apart in terms of well-being all day long in our classrooms that I don't think that many other districts could say outside of standalone programming. I do think like our social counseling piece is probably one of the most dynamic things that we're able to do in terms of having a social counselor at every single campus that's not a guidance counselor. I think that nobody else does that. And I think that is just something that's super helpful and super valued by our families and community. And I think John has a whole list of counseling supports that are offered above and beyond what a traditional ISD does.
I feel very confident it's a quantum improvement over what any district is doing.
Yes.
And I'll give you just, if I could give one quick little example. So like, let's see, on our staff, we actually have SEL coaches by division who go into schools and only coach teachers on how to do SEL practices. I literally don't know another district that has, maybe somebody else does, that has, obviously we have like instructional coaching, but literally has coaching only on SEL. Like he watches the advisory lesson, gives feedback to teachers about how do you incorporate movement into your lesson. And so that to me, I think is an example of the level of intentionality and rigor we're trying to have in what everybody is saying they do right now.
I was going to say, you read that everyone's doing it, so it's like, it's very helpful to hear the quantum difference.
Yeah, great. But yes, and that definition, yes, was great around the difference between those two in terms of what happened last year in terms of this being very muted out in terms of our overall performance with regard to growth. So what is actually, how do we actually compute domain one from a state perspective? There are actually three parts of domain one for an entire district. One is the overall student achievement. The second is your college, career, and military readiness. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And then also the graduation rate. I put a note here because we're not going to talk about graduation rate. We've had an over 97% graduation rate for the last three cohorts, and so that's something we've traditionally maintained pretty high. And it is a very interesting calculation that the state does. They literally take when you're freshman, whoever your ninth grade cohort is, that gets factored in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years down the road. So if a student has left Uplift, want them to continue to go somewhere else, but that may not always be the case. But we've lost very few students in terms of not graduating from high school over the last 3 years. I wanted to just stamp the point of, in order for us to become an A district, we have to increase our scholar achievement on STAR and AOC, and we have to improve our college readiness on ACT. Our TSI assessment, which is the Texas Success Initiative Assessment, it's like a placement exam that students take for all public schools in Texas. And so students have an opportunity to take that assessment while they're in high school. And so it can either be the ACT assessment or the TSI assessment, which students can earn college readiness credit for. And then also we'll talk about our diploma program assessments. So I want to talk about what are some of the challenges that have gotten in our way in order for us to achieve the goals that we've set out to do. One, you'll notice from the data packet, and those are slides 7 through 18, I put in MAP data because we haven't talked about MAP data as a board. We've really talked about STAR. My top line on how to think about MAP is we use it for two purposes. One is nationally normed, so we can see how we do compared to students across the country. The second is around using our quintile 4 and quintile 5. Students who typically score quintile 4 and quintile 5 on MAP tend to score meets and masters on STAR. So it gives us a predictive element around how students are going to perform on their STAR assessment. So we've already got that information for the start of this school year, so let's be intentional about how to prepare those students. Okay. What we've noticed, and what you'll see in your data packet, is that those numbers have gone down over the last several years, right? So in order to improve our performance overall achievement, we've got to improve our outcomes on the MAP assessments. The second is around college readiness and ACT. as we've grown out our high schools, we've had a really hard time having an above 20 average, 20 or 21 average on the ACT. So over the last 3-4 years, we've added another junior class to our high school cohort. And traditionally in the past, back when I was a high school leader, usually that first class was your best class and had really strong ACT results. What we've seen over the last several years is that first class is not showing like high ACT performance. And so we've seen just a decline in our ACT composite average as we've added more students into our high schools. And the last one is our newest assessment, is diploma program assessments. We need to grow those pass rates. It's new for us. This was actually the first testing year, and I'll talk about that when I talk about diploma. And so we're learning where our students are, and our teachers are going to have a great year in terms of learning from the assessment last year and determining how we're making plans around how to address preparing our students for the diploma assessment. So those data slides, I've got those highlighted there for you if you want to take a look as I go through the next few slides. Let's talk about MAP in terms of declining performance and declining scholar achievement on MAP, and just talk about performance gaps between scholar groups. What we've noticed, and I put these things here, I'm not going to go over every bulleted item here, I'm going to go over the bulleted one. It's just, when it comes to looking at the data, we've just had low levels of accountability in terms of how leaders look at, disaggregate, and respond to the data. And so we recognized this last year. We would get new assessment data like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And some leaders are off and running, probably like the ones you saw in front of you, and some leaders are taking baby steps toward responding to that data. And we felt like it would be a great opportunity for us to talk about, what do we want leaders reacting to? What data should they be looking at? And how do we support them in responding to that data very quickly? So what we've done this year is using more frequent assessments. We call them tri-weekly assessments in both our math and reading or English courses from primary through high school. So we've added these little small mini assessments that are aligned to the STAR end of course assessment type materials. So that gives our teachers opportunities to assess throughout the entire year how students are performing on those particular standards to ensure that they're meeting grade level expectations. What we've seen so far, and Karen Aldridge alluded to, we've seen some pretty strong beginning of the year performance in our primary school when looking at our math data. I haven't even shared this with Yasmin yet, but they've grown quite a bit just in the few weeks of school that we've had, and my hope, like when we do the actual analysis, is our summer program is leading to less of a learning loss, and they're able to retain more of that information and had a really good, strong start to the year. So that's really promising in terms of what we're seeing so far in assessment. There's just a lot of complexity because, as you mentioned, our scholars in many schools, Shamanda is very fortunate to have more scholars that are at grade level, but that's not the case at every single school. And our leaders are really struggling with how do you make sure your teachers are prepared to deal with where all your students fall in terms of like their level of mastery of content. And thinking about teachers who are brand new to the profession, that is one of the hardest things to do, is to be able to deal with a student who's at quintile 5 and a student who's at quintile 1 in the same classroom, and you're delivering, just to have like a rigorous instruction in front of you. And so our leaders, one of their challenges that the managing directors and curriculum team are working through is how do you establish classroom lessons and procedures or systems so that scholars are able to get what they need out of each instructional block. What we've done is, I talked about the tri-weekly assessments. I want to give you guys an example. If you guys could help me hand out some of these. Let me just grab one. Back up.
We're going to pass it this way.
Pass down. Come on. Pick one and pass. There we go.
So, as you get down, you'll notice obviously a huge piece of paper. This is an actual analysis of one of our tri-weekly assessments for high school algebra 1.
probably hard to read some of the print up here. It's pretty small, but I can tell you what's on here. They can have mine. It actually goes over each question that's on the assessment in terms of what's the state standard it's aligned to, right? It gives you the performance of each school on each one of the standards, right? And then on the side here, it'll give an example of what you should do in order to respond to the student outcome. And so these type of reports our curriculum team provides to our managing directors and our school leaders, so that as school leaders are sitting with their teachers, right, they're not just starting from, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? They know how they've done comparatively, right? If that's something that we struggle with across the district, right, that's probably something we need to look at in terms of what curricular adjustment we need to make. But if there's a tip or coaching need that they have to do with their teacher, they have that information in front of them to be able to do that. So this was a process improvement in terms of not only are we going to give the assessment, we're going to help you with some of this analysis so that you have a good model of what you would do. You could do this as a campus, you could do this classroom by classroom, right? Or scholar by scholar to get down to how your students are performing. So I want to just give you an example of what this is actually looking like on the ground so far, and we've gotten really positive feedback from our leaders that this is a useful resourcing tool that helps them do some of that planning work to meet the scholars' diverse learning needs. Any questions before I move on to my next challenge?
Obviously, there's a lot of red.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the year.
Okay.
You know.
So is that?
Yeah, so typically in high school Algebra 1, what you will encounter are students who took 8th grade math. And so those are usually your lowest performing students in mathematics. And typically in the beginning of the year, you know, we have a lot of brand new teachers in Algebra 1. Students are just getting used to high school. That this is like an area where I'm not surprised by what I see. If we see that this next quarter, then we've got, you know, some more intentional deep work that we have to do. We already have planned in terms of more intentional deep work to do, but I think that for the beginning of the year, the first tri-weekly, it's not surprising.
This is cumulative to students, the total student base. This is by campus, right?
By campus.
So this is a group of students that
Correct.
make up this.
And each campus has a different number, and that number could range from 20 to about 90 per campus, taking Algebra 1.
I think the question is, you get it by campus, but then you actually have it by classroom.
Yeah.
And then so you can identify the kids that are on the cusp of being able to be, you can help them go over the points you need. So do you create after-school study care or online study care for them to actually be able to enhance that value set?
Yeah, I wish I could take you with me on my campus visits with leaders. Like, that's the work we want leaders to do. Like, it's like, this is our first step as a network level, to give you an example. You now then, they have a way in which they have, most school leaders do this, how they look at it by classroom, by student, and then they're able to assign who gets the high impact tutoring, or how is high impact tutoring going for you, what additional support do you have to have. And so that's actually what we were talking about in terms of the variability in that type of thing, that type of performance, behavior.
But does the high impact tutoring need to be one-on-one, or can it be something that we recorded that they can look at on their own time when they go home?
Yeah, so we have our experience with high impact tutoring last year, especially for high school students. We found that in-person high impact tutoring was the most impactful. We have virtual tutoring for students, and we have a lot of the video, like Khan Academy type of things to support students. For our Algebra 1 students, I think it's the one-on-one intentional support that's really the difference maker in terms of their performance. But we have tried a number of things with our high schoolers, but that so far has been the most impactful.
And the reason I asked that question is because I think, like I used to work at Deloitte, and I know that there's a lot of individuals that are out of college want to get back to the community, and they might be interested in actually doing some online courses to where it's pre-recorded, and then they would have an email address they can send notes to and say, more than happy to talk to you over the phone on how to solve something. So I think that that's a way you can have a strategic partnership with corporations and not take some of the stress from the teachers.
Yeah, that's a good idea, for sure. Yes.
So whenever I read in the notes where we need to have more planning time, is this analysis and assessment in that planning time? Because this is time consuming for those leaders and for faculty. Do you consider taking that data, analyzing and acting on it? Is that in planning time or is read curricular planning?
No, that is correct. So
Okay.
so far, what I've noticed, and the secondary MDs are going to look at me strangely, our primary leaders have done a really good job. I just don't know all the processes in secondary before I say this. But I know our primary leaders have done a really good job of designated the days. One of the planning days is the data analysis day. Another day is for the curricular planning. And so I know even within there, Priscilla can attest to this, there's still not enough time to get through it all. But that is the idea of dedicating different days of the week for different types of planning.
This is telling you how old I am, but when I was in school, used to pull out like the Algebra 1 students and they went to this class, and the Algebra 2 went to this. And so it was easier to focus on what those students needed. Is there any of that, or is it just one math teacher teaching all these levels of Algebra 1?
So in each high school, they have an intervention block. And this is one of the complexities I'm going to talk about is, so for our 9th graders, that might be an easier thing to do because they're first time in high school. And so during an intervention block, it would be very targeted on this particular group of students. You're going to math or Algebra 1 intervention to get the support. So it's a 30 to 45 minute block, 4 days a week that they would get that support. One of the complexities with high school is once a student fails an end of course assessment, that support, that intervention block, more than likely is going to be dedicated to preparing them to retake that end of course assessment. So if I'm not doing well in one of my other courses that I'm currently taking, I now have, my teacher has either, I've come to after school tutoring, there might be some hit tutoring inside of the classroom depending on how they structured it, so they might get that support. But then that really does, how we currently have it set up, fall on the teacher to support that student. One of the things that we want to get better at in our high schools is just doing more small group. You see small groups in primary and middle school. In high school, we're growing in that area, but a good small group instruction model may also support students who need just a little bit more than what they're currently getting, full group. So it's something that we're working on second quarter to determine what's our small group instructional model for our high school classes.
I'm going to encourage us, it is okay, guys, because Remy has 2 other challenges to talk through, to maybe hold our questions on this specific challenge, an opportunity to the end, and that way we can share at a high level the other 2, but just being mindful of our time.
Sounds good.
But I love the conversation.
So what I'll talk about is our ACT scores. And as I mentioned, they were going not the way we want them to do, going up as we've grown and expanded. One of the things I think that has been challenging for high school leaders is adding the diploma program. As great as it has been in terms of giving students the access to more challenging curriculum, they've had to now prioritize a whole nother set of assessments in preparation. So those same junior teachers who traditionally would prepare students for the ACT are now the diploma program teachers. And so they are pulled in a couple different directions in terms of how they support students with actual test prep if there's no dedicated course or time on that campus to do that prep work. And so one of the things that we've done was just with the leadership of Mike Carbone, our Deputy Chief of Secondary Schools, is just what's a targeted plan for each student. Let's actually look at how our students are performing. How well did you do on the ACT? How well did you do on the TSI? Let's talk about what your preparation looks like. And some kids are going to get another at-bat at TSI or multiple at-bats, and some kids are going to take their ACT because they were just this far away. So we've tried to individualize what does preparation look like for some of these college admissions assessments to support that. I just did a lot there. Again, complexity here is just the time to internalize this is pretty low. Like there's just a lot for teachers to
plan around their course content and ACT prep materials, and so it's just not enough time in the day for them to be able to do that. And so again, I talked about our individual counseling model. We've now added a component in the curriculum for every course. There's an ACT prep set of problems that they do at the beginning of each class. And so that just gives kids at-bats at doing that, and it's not something additional that a teacher is planning for outside of their current lesson of instruction, is the approach that we're taking. Do we have time?
Why don't we pick one of the videos?
Okay,
Hello, Uplift Education Board. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Fuller, the Dean of College Prep at Uplift Heights Secondary. I hope you are doing well. Thank you for supporting our goals of post-secondary access. Over the past month, the Heights Road to College and Career team, in conjunction with members of CMO, has taken a deep dive into our college, career, and military readiness data, with special attention to seniors. Through this, we've celebrated individual scholar successes, as well as taken a reflective look into the readiness of Heights scholars as a whole. To be clear, as it stands in September, we have work to do. Our seniors, even those in the top quintile, have struggled to find success on the ACT and have found passing the TSIA burdensome. To address this, we examined our data and identified the best opportunity for each senior to achieve CCMR readiness, and committed to providing small group ACT prep, focused TSIA guidance, and Texas College Bridge completion support accordingly. Each group receives daily instruction during their intervention block, along with weekly tracking, goal setting, and reflection in their college and career transitions course. This is a full team effort that involves our TCC and every senior teacher. Using data as our guide, our goal is to increase Heights' TSIA pass rate from 10% last year to at least 40% for the class of 2025. Further, by the end of January, we hope to have at least 80% of seniors be considered CCMR ready by scoring well enough on the ACT, passing the TSIA, and or completing the Texas College Bridge program. Thank you for your time and commitment to Uplift Heights and Uplift Education. We hope to see you on our campus soon.
So Dr. Fuller is one of our Deans of College Prep, so we tried to explain that process that I mentioned, and so we just believe that being more deliberate about how we support students and what assessment did they take will definitely give us the push that we need to improve the college readiness rates overall. My last one, I would go really quickly and get back to my last couple points here, was around the diploma program assessment. So one quick thing is that our students did not sit for diploma program tests until last spring. We've had 3 testing years, but 2 of them were during the height of the pandemic. And so students only had to submit 1 assessment in order to get course credit. That worked in our favor because there's just 1 out of the other 4 options. But when students had to sit for all 4 assessments, we saw the rates for pass rates go down. I don't think that was surprising to us in terms of, we've upped how much they have to do in terms of earn the credit. And so we know that over the next several years, we will have a lot of work to do to ensure that we're preparing our teachers to do that. One of the challenges is that this year, we've replaced 40% of our diploma program teachers. And so we basically have almost half of our teachers are brand new to the program. And so a lot of that experience that we just worked to build over the last 3-4 years now, we're going to have to rebuild that. I think this will be a slower build over time as we hope to make sure we retain those teachers, but build up their expertise to really deliver the rigor required to pull off a successful diploma program for our high school students. I just wanted to share, and this is what I wanted to mention, our goals for 2023, and I'll talk about the top and the bottom that Yasmin shared earlier, are the 50% needs and 40% college readiness rates. We do think that those are achievable, and so we're going to keep working at those and working through some of the complexities. But as you see long term, again, we want to remain an A-rated district. We want to up our expectations in terms of hitting 70% needs by 25-26. And 70% college ready. So it'll take some really intense years of hard work and in a really challenging time in education. But I think that as we really work through many of our challenges, have some sustainable systems, I think we can get much closer to our goal in 3 years of those numbers.
I just mentioned, Yasmin mentioned, the school leaders mentioned. I'll just focus on the ones on the left here that are where we're focusing our time instructionally is really on whole group instruction. That first instruction is the best instruction that students should receive. And then again, the comprehensive responsive data cycles are kind of the instructional muscle we're trying to build on our teams to be able to ensure we're closing our performance gaps and raising overall achievement. So I just want to recap my points that I shared earlier in terms of last year. Like overall, we did fine. We did well comparatively to the prior years, during the two toughest years of the pandemic. But we know that our competitive advantage remains in domain 1, overall student achievement, and that's where we're looking to spend our energy over the next several years, is improving overall student achievement, improving our college readiness rates, and closing our performance gaps between our scholar groups. Lastly, again, how we're actually doing that, I'm going to say it again, data cycles. So if you hear anything out there that someone's doing and you're trying to plant it in your head, like those are things that, I'm always open to hearing more about, but having really good response to data cycles, ensuring that our teams are adhering to the network curriculum, and we're supporting our teachers with that. And then lastly, just providing that targeted professional development. We've created just new optional professional development that's offered throughout the month, like all the time, to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our teachers, and we're really trying to work with our teams as much as they can to hold planning time sacred for our teachers and ensure that they get them. And again, the three things we need are just how do we, if you know any models that people have done, things at scale, they've been able to replicate a similar model at scale. We'd love to hear about that, and any support that you guys know for organizations that do high quality college admissions exam preparation, that would be wonderful as well. Just wanted to give you an update of like what's to come in December. We did not talk a lot about college and career today, but we will talk about this in December, so we'll give the update on where we are with our 5-year goals, something very similar. We'll talk about the progress on improving our college readiness rates one more time, so I'll give you an update on the current senior class. We'll share our estimated college completion, and then we'll talk about the career team's work in terms of improving our alumni living wage. Thank you guys so much for your time. Yes?
Well, I just want to say to everybody that we're right on for a 15-minute recess, but we were thinking we could probably work in a small number of questions, kind of reallocate just a handful of minutes. I had a comment and a question, and then we'll go to Ricky, okay? The comment is, it's tremendous presentation. Thank you so much. Lots of great material there. We all know this has been a very challenging environment, but I think it's really worth highlighting for the board. The 86 score on Domain 1, so far above the peers that were listed. In this environment, well done. That really deserves mention. We all know no part of that was easy, and we're grateful. The question is, that came to my mind is about you noted in one slide, the arguably decreased motivation to do the ACT and related tests in view of the test optional world. I guess the question I would have would be, well, it may well be that world keeps changing, maybe back in the direction of tests, and it may also be that our scholars in some cases can improve their, let's say, odds in terms of college outcomes by taking the test and doing well on it. So it should sort of reinstilling some motivation be a priority there?
100%, and I think we'll talk a lot more when Daniel comes to talk about the college update. I think now we have some use cases around students who graduated within the last 2 years, how it's going, how they've been performing, what are things they would have done differently, because I think they were in the beginning of kind of like a little bit of a mindset shift. I think that would be really good for us to call out. But I think too, there are just many benefits of having a good ACT score, and one including financial aid. That has not changed, but that has definitely gotten muted out in the conversation around college or career or things like that. And then we just have to do a better job of educating both parents and students on why it still matters, because that standard has not been shifted at all.
Thank you. Ricky.
So my question was related to, how we can help in the kind of the models at scale, like the first bullet and then the third bullet, the positive outcomes. I want to just get a little bit more honed in on to what specific, kind of models you would want us to present, because I think about, I think you talked a lot about like the one-on-one instruction is a proven educational value, that like that time is so precious, you know, and anything less than that one-on-one interaction is something that probably is not as impactful. But I think about like something like this, and like the time and effort that goes into like building this, and us that work in corporations and in big companies and do big data and stuff like that. I think that, is this what you're talking about, scalable models, you know, efficiencies in data collection, mining, et cetera? Because I feel like I wouldn't be able to offer as much in like the best practices for facilitation and instruction, but in this data side, I think is where most of us probably have more experience.
Well, I wasn't referring to that. That is a need of mine as well, in terms of like how to package data quickly, get it turned around, and disaggregate it in a way that's helpful to teachers. We do have some really good data systems. Chris Davis, our Senior Director of Data Management, was just here. We do have some really good models of how to do that. And teachers have data that's probably much more accessible with a click of a button. So we have that, but we can always get better at how to do that. I think I was really talking about from school to school, when you have, like this, if Priscilla and Mike outlined, this is our vision for schools, these are the systems and structures that should exist at each. How do you make sure that that's replicable across multiple contexts? I think I was looking more for like look, feel, and content or experience during the day. How do we ensure that that happens across schools is where we've struggled in terms of what's the training look like for someone who's been able to do that? What are the kind of the supports you have to put in place? How do you monitor those types of things? You know, like how do they, once they define that, how do they like ensure that it's instituted with fidelity?
Like culture and experience at scale.
Correct.
Exactly, outside the education space, right? So like, why is it every time you go into a Nordstrom's, like you expect a certain level of customer service, right? Like, what are the systems being used to make sure that you have a consistent experience, whether you go into one in Houston or in Dallas? That is what we're trying to help, is like when you go into an Uplift school, how do you make sure that the systems that have been, that we believe are best for kids are happening in a consistent, high quality way, regardless of what Uplift school you go into. And that's why we're going to draw from practices from others outside the education space.
It made me instantly think of Chick-fil-A when she said that, but then it also made me think of Apple, because they have a system and they want you in their system, but it doesn't quite work for the people in there. It works for the workers, but not the people standing in line, making their appointment, looking for their name up there, like, why is this not moving? So I do think that we can create a system that does that, but being really, really careful that it's working for the people it should work for, and not,
that's a great example.
and not for us.
Don't be Apple.
Don't be Apple, be Chick-fil-A. But it also made me think about this. I love the color coding, and I was wondering if, we don't know if this is possible, if we overlaid elementary school or something, how does the color, what is the trend, and what could we be doing 2 or 3 grades down so this is more blue and green, but helping to prep kids so that it's
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is what our team has spent a lot more time talking across the continuum and looking at data sets. What we haven't done is how do we share that with school leaders to say like
insights. What's the
exactly like what this is what you're preparing kids for, and this is how we're progressing. Right. You know, or not progressing toward.
Cool.
I have to leave at 2:30, so I was going to say something real quick. Being an auditor in the room and talking about processes and controls and making them repeatable. There are platforms out there specifically for that. They're called control risk governance tools. And as you remember, when Sarbanes-Oxley happened and all the banks collided, people had to actually say that I wasn't just doing it, you have to prove it to the auditors. So there are companies out there that make a platform that you can subscribe to, and basically you put all the governance things you want to measure and monitor and reward for. And so therefore they have to upload that information into those respective tools, and then you can actually monitor it. And you can get standard reporting out of it that gives you red, green, or yellow. So then you can respond to those individuals that need the assistance and help. So just keep that in mind. And a lot of them have K through 12 and university discounts for those tools. Now, change management is a big thing, getting people on board to do that, because now you just gave them more work. but in the long term, it's going to be a lot better because it's consistency.
Maybe. Thank you, Ed. We have maybe time for one more, anybody?
How's your, I'm sorry, your hands up. I'm sorry.
Both of you all.
We'll let you both go, and then we'll just get a copy.
So my struggle continue, this turnover, new teachers, new systems, but if you've got turnover, MDs, how are you on a daily basis with your MDs managing through that in terms of proactive?
Yeah, so proactively, I think it is how the managing directors support our school leaders really in building culture and monitoring culture. I know that's something that they check in probably weekly at this point, is how is everyone doing and what do people need. I think organizationally we've started skip level meetings where managing directors are actually meeting directly with teachers at each of their campuses that they support to hear about what exactly they need to be successful. I think they've been able to turn around some quick fixes really fast and kind of raise up what are the bigger things that are needed that we probably need to solve organizationally. I think another thing that I've appreciated about the start of this year is that we're on the ground. I spent half of 3 days on campus with both Priscilla, Mike, and the MDs, working with school leaders, being with teachers, so that we can hear it very quickly and respond as fast as we can, because it changes. The needs changes. What's bothering people on Monday is not what's bothering people on Friday. There are incidents that happen, and I think people feeling like we're in the work together, I think has gone a long way with trying to retain as many people as we possibly can. And so I think we've just been pretty nimble and just flexible around switching up things that traditionally probably would be like, no, you got to do it. Now we're like, maybe not. Maybe it's not as important as we thought.
Last question over there was Rusty or Bilar.
I was just going to say, it sort of relates to what Andre said. If you look across the board and all you're trying to achieve with students doing better and anyway, the whole spectrum, I keep looking at its teacher retention. Its retention matters to all of them. And we need to figure out how to do a better job. We meaning all of us. Yeah, all of us. And my other sort of question was, I just heard on the news this week, I think, that the Texas Education Department is putting in a new STEM requirement starting in first grade, and STEM has to be introduced in some fashion every day of the week for elementary school kids. Is how do they just do that?
Well, we could talk a long time. I've got a whole bunch of other things this week. Yeah. That is.
They can just say, you need to do that, and you figure it out.
Okay, so we are going to give you all a break. Awesome job, Remy. And so we are going to go until 2:37. So you get 10 minutes. Right outside these doors are coffee, water, and snacks, and the restrooms are right around that corner. So 2:37, please be back in. Thank you, guys.
What's that? You got ready to start?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's just actually get started, and maybe that will inspire people who haven't come in yet. So, let me just say to whoever is listening,
take control.
You're starting with or without her?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm directed here to say the time, so I will say it. The time is 2:40, and we're back in open session. Available, whether we have a quorum present?
It's a fine. Doesn't
matter.
We never actually officially closed. We didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
We've been open.
And human capital update. Let's start.
Great. For those of you who have been with us for a while, you can tell that we did the pre-read and the presentation a little bit differently than we have in years past, where we gave you all the data on the front end so that in our live time together, we could focus more in on dialogue around what the key challenges are that we're facing today, what makes them so complex, and how we are rising to the call to action this year. So given that, I do invite you to open up your binder. If you go to the third tab about halfway through, that's where you'll see all of the human capital material, including some of the data that might be helpful to just flip to and look at while we're going through the presentation today. I really appreciated everybody's questions for our school leaders on the panel. I had to bite my tongue. Of course, I have perspective on all of these things, but I wanted to honor you being able to hear their voice today. Given that, I know that this is top of mind for everybody. Christine, I think your question of what is going on is probably the big question in the room. So I'm hopeful that what I share with you will hopefully give you some additional things to think about in response to that question of what is happening right now that's really making the teacher shortage and just what is happening with teachers' education different than how it's been maybe ever, or at least in a very long time. So I'm going to keep an eye on the clock so that we stop no later than 3:05, so that there's plenty of time for questions and discussion. But I think you'll see as we go through that a lot of these things are interconnected. So a thought that you might have hearing about one thing could very well be spoken to in the next segment. So with that, similar to Remy, I wanted to boil down kind of what are the top notes for you to walk away with, given the amount of data and just information and things to think about that we're going to be covering today. So I think first and foremost, the business of public K-12 education has always been hard. You think about the pay and how it's low in comparison to other sectors and even compared to other jobs in the public sector. You think about what it takes to be dealing and working directly with students, as well as navigating all of the dynamics that come with parents and families. And then you also think about the local and state policy, the local, state, and national policies that are always changing and influencing the dynamic as far as what is required, what is not, what's allowed, what's not, how much funding is available and is not. So all of those things have existed forever, making the work on the human capital side tricky. But where we are in this point in time, we are experiencing a historically unprecedented labor market right now, and thinking about the number of people that are moving and leaving jobs and what that means for competition within the market. We are also in a historically unprecedented time for K-12 education coming out of the pandemic, and also just navigating some of the other, not related to the pandemic, social issues that are at play. So for all of those reasons, the human capital challenges that we are facing today, they are increasing in volume and they are also increasing in complexity. Doesn't mean that we're not leaning in or going to lean in and continue tackling them, but many of these things are not going to be fixed over a year, and many of these challenges are not going to go away over the next couple of years likely. So I invite you to listen and just join a dialogue that might feel a little unfinished today, knowing that what we are facing is complex, and to really get at the root of the issues, it's going to take some time, and it's also going to take some innovation. So with that, the three biggest challenges that I have lifted out for you today that I'm going to get into much more detail on are, number one, retention's going down, and that means that vacancies are going up. The second is around, right, you heard both Brady and Katie talk about just the teacher shortage, how that's manifesting for them in their hiring of teachers, but also what that means for us as a sector with what we are looking at and what we're going to need to really, I think, shift our approach on to make sure that we have people who are not just staying in the profession, but coming into the profession to begin with. And then the third is around barriers to workplace engagement. You know, the question around happy, right? Like, is that the right word that we should be using to talk about the state, the emotional state of our teachers? We talk a lot about engagement. We know that that is necessary for people to feel successful and productive at their jobs. But there's different things that impact that, namely workplace conditions and to what degree people feel like their most basic needs are being met. So really understanding what the barriers are to that so that we can start taking them down is our third big challenge. When we think about all three of these things, you know, at the root of these, I think at the root of these, the two common things are, first and foremost, the demands that are coming to teachers and the K-12 workforce. The volume and the intensity is increasing, but the accountability is not changing. So when you think about the number of things that a teacher is having to deal with on any given day, thinking about academic, social, and mental health needs, right? There is a rise in the amount and also the intensity of what they are navigating, but the accountability and what's expected is not changing. If anything, it's going up. I think that the second is that the workforce is changing. COVID really just put all of us, flip the script and turn things upside down and rethinking how and when we work. But the K-12 model has not really thought differently about when and how we teach and kids learn. And so that creates this really interesting rub when you think about what is needed for the education workforce, knowing that what people are desiring is different and what's available to them is different today than it was even 5 years ago. But yet we do work in a sector that has institutional constraints that are just hard to navigate when you think about what can we be doing differently to help make sure that we too are evolving, even if it's at a slower rate, at some rate, to not be so far behind the rest of the modern workforce that people are just leaving the sector altogether. So given that, we're thinking about how we approach these really through three things. One, acknowledging that in spite of the complexity and systemic pieces that make these challenges hard to problem solve, we know that there are immediate needs that need to be addressed. And so we are actively working to think creatively in how we can meet the immediate needs that scholars and teachers have this year. We're also really digging into understanding what the key drivers are for both teacher satisfaction and engagement, knowing that we've got to get at this question of how do we keep people with us in the classroom for longer stretches of time. And then we're also exploring much bigger questions and bigger innovations to help us really, again, modernize the K-12 workforce alongside the rest of the American workforce. And so with that, we're starting to have bigger conversations amongst each other and with our staff around, our instructional model. Where are the opportunities for us to think differently about when and how we are teaching? And how does that change the way that we are approaching the teacher role and thinking about what the scope of their day looks like, as well as the core duties and responsibilities that they are asked to do day in and day out. So given that, those are our three big challenges, and that's how we're thinking about them for this year, but also over the next couple of years. All that to say, in spite of the challenges, we still have really amazing things that are happening with our human capital. So I think first and foremost, we have pivoted and adapted our recruitment and hiring cycles to be able to hire at a volume and on a timeline that is very different than we've ever experienced before. Traditionally, most hiring happens before the start of the school year. That's just not reality anymore, and you will see that if you didn't already in some of the data around what mid-year resignations looked like last year, right? So we're hiring hundreds of people every year and throughout the year, and we have adapted our recruitment and selection cycles to be able to do that, knowing that it's an immediate need. We also are continuing to expand the programs and do more innovations at the network level and at the school level to get at how we can best reward and recognize talent and our top teachers, knowing that recognition goes a very long way in keeping someone in the work, but also in thinking through how we can do some more creative and different things on the strategic staffing side. And then third, we have a resilient organizational culture. One of the new structures that we're rolling out this year is our skip level meetings. And in those meetings, senior leadership has an opportunity to talk directly with teachers and employees across the field. Because we're focusing on basic needs, we ask them what are the things that kind of keep you from being positive and productive in your job today. We hear the list of things that are challenges, but then we end in asking people, why do you stay at Uplift? And time again, you hear testimony about how Uplift is so different from the other schools and districts where I worked, how much people like the people with whom they are working with, day in and day out, and how their belief in what we're doing for scholars is something that keeps them coming back every day, and that us talking openly about the challenges that we are all navigating is also part of what keeps them here, because they know that these are not necessarily things that there's a magic wand to just fix, but they see and they hear everyone talking about it and leaning into how we can be doing things better and differently. Okay, so with that, the first two slides that I have for you is just to give you the lay of the land of who we have here at Uplift. We have just shy of 2,700 employees. We talk mostly about teachers, and that is what the bulk of our presentation is going to focus on today. But I wanted to share this with you just so that you could visually see. They make up half of the pie. So we have a lot of other support staff that are supporting classrooms and supporting schools, and then also supporting operations in our central management office. So while we're talking intently about teachers, teachers make up about half of our total employee base. So we have to think about all of these other roles too when it comes to recruitment, retention, hiring, given the role that they play in supporting who is the role group that most directly impacts student learning with our teacher group. We talked about this a couple of times, but our Uplift tenure is, look, the vast majority of our employees are in their first 2 years of being at Uplift. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're coming with no teaching experience, but they're still a new employee to us. And so this 53%, I think, is a compelling data point to just have in mind too, in thinking about what the attrition and what the hiring has meant for the total makeup of our teacher workforce. This, I know, was in the pre-read, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I did want to lift out just how we did on our key talent metrics. Retention, we saw about a 6% regression from last year to this year. That is in line with trends that we are seeing across the state and nationally across the charter school sector. The state has typically had higher retention than we have, or the charter school sector has, but they too saw a 4% reduction in their retention from last school year to the following school year. And with our 72% where we landed, that put us really in the middle of the pack when we got to hear and see some informal retention numbers from the Charter School Growth Fund of all the schools in their portfolio. So we went down about 6%, which is disappointing. However, I do want to share that that is in line with the trends we are seeing across public schools in the state, and then also public charter schools nationally. Our academic director tenure held steady as far as how many have been in the seat for 5 years, but we were really pleased with our leader retention at 80%. I know one of the things that we talked about a few months ago was giving some financial incentives tied to contracts. We think that we saw the benefit of that with how many of our leaders decided to stay at a period in time when a lot of leaders too are leaving the profession for other professional opportunities. With that, I'm going to scoot us forward. And again, these three challenges that I want to anchor on are lower retention, higher vacancies, our shortage, and then barriers to engagement. So I think first with teacher retention, right, I want to just speak to you how this challenge is manifesting itself for us here this year. So, you know, we lost 28% of our teachers, which is more. And if you look at pages 7 through 14 of the data report, you can see a bit more detail around what the retention numbers look like by region and by school. If you look at that, you're going to see that while our average was 71.5, rounded up to 72%, there's quite a bit of variability. Regionally, Fort Worth continues to be our region with the lowest retention at 64%, with Irving, right, our most established region, having the highest retention at 83%. And then within schools, the range within schools is all the way from one of our smallest, newest middle schools in Fort Worth, Elevate, having 33%, to Northwest High School, our most established school, having 92%. So while that's our average, we still are seeing quite a bit of variability with some trends of higher or lower retention in different regions within our network. What was new for us last year was the spike in mid-year resignations. So if you look on pages 15 and 16, you can see some more data around who left when. But typically, teachers leave during the summer, go take another job potentially with another school or district, And that allows us to do most of our hiring for the next school year, and that's just not how things played out last year. So if you look at our labor data, you see that just shy of 40% of the people who left, they left before the end of the school year, meaning they didn't work until May 27th. They quit and they left in July, August, September, October, sometime before May 27th. And of that, we had about 10% of our teacher base resign between July and December. So what that meant for us last year was we had a lot of vacancies that came to be in the middle of the school year, which is 10 times more challenging to fill than what you would be looking at if you were looking to fill and hire that position for the following school year. All of that happened and was in line with what you saw happening across the country with the Great Resignation, and over the course of 2021, we just felt the impact of that with how many people left off cycle in that first half of the school year. As far as where people are going, we're trying to do a better job of collecting data from our leavers, but I tried to share with you what we have today. You can see that the majority of people who are leaving are reporting to us that they are leaving for opportunities that are not within a K-12 district, 55% of teachers. So that I thought was a compelling data point around people are leaving, and they're not just leaving to go work for another district, they're leaving to probably go do something else, something different. As far as the reasons why people are leaving, you'll see that there's some variability if you look at the cut by region, but overall the top cited reasons are working conditions followed by pay or opportunity, and then supervisor. Working conditions is one of those loaded terms where it's like, what does that mean? It's open to interpretation, but the most cited things that we hear and see are time, instructional resources and support, and then classroom management or behavior concerns. So that's what we know about who's leaving, when are they leaving, and why, where are they going. This is made complex by the Great Resignation, what is happening nationally. 48 million people, 48 million Americans voluntarily left their jobs in 2021. That is a higher number than has ever been tracked before by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. A lot of people are leaving. And as far as the reasons as to why, people are sharing that there's just more opportunity. It's a great time if you're interested in crossing over and trying something new. That remote work, that being a highly desired thing given what people kind of got to take a bite of the apple of and try during the pandemic. A general just reevaluation of what do I want to do with my life and my career are what people are most often citing for leaving of those 48 million Americans that have walked away from their job for whatever reason over the last year. So given that, of course, it's a super competitive market. People are leaving. Everyone is looking. And so that is absolutely something that creates just another layer of complexity. We're not just competing with other districts, we're also competing with other sectors in a way that I think we haven't before. So given that, our turnover and tenure, right? Turnover being high, tenure being low, that's not a new problem to public education. We've been talking about that as a challenge for years, but it's definitely exacerbated by the conditions that we are seeing in today's market and in today's time. So given that, we're thinking about how we can tackle this through a couple of things, removing the barriers to engagement. We're also trying to be responsive to what we have seen in our exit data around working conditions, really unpacking and getting at that, as well as supervisor and just pay and opportunity as the reasons why people are leaving. We're also continuing the work that we started last year around innovation and teacher sustainability. So we pulled some low-hanging fruit for this school year and made some changes to the academic calendar to build in some more breaks earlier on in the fall. We also have made some changes to our bell schedules across all of secondary to just give people more time throughout the day. We're trying some school-level pilots to try a few new things and thinking about how can we create more time for planning for teachers, how can we give teachers more opportunity to authentically connect with one another. But we're also thinking about these bigger picture things of what are some things within our teaching model that maybe we could innovate and or the teacher job that would get at the root cause of why we see people leaving the profession. So it's a both and proposition for us in thinking about what are the things that we can try right now that are smaller innovations while we really work together and work with our peers across the sector to think about what are the bigger changes and innovations that we want to be leading on. The next one is around the teacher shortage. So, right, there's less qualified applicants, there's less people that are going into educator prep programs, and, you know, right, education continues to be an unattractive profession for many people. Looking at pay and also looking at just what people hear on the news about the challenges, both with, right, kind of the political hot buttons that teachers are having to navigate and steer clear of, as well as just all of the stress that has come with school opening, closing, kind of going back and forth and responding to the pandemic. So given that, this is manifesting itself for us in continuing to have challenges with our hardest to fill positions, thinking about special education, secondary math. We're also seeing the pressure on our EPP pipelines. So our longstanding partners of Urban Teacher, Teach for America, Relay Graduate School, they have not delivered on their numbers for the last couple of years. So we are seeing the same pressures that exist for us with our hiring exist with prep programs as well as with substitutes. So it's like everyone that's hiring an educator is struggling with the same thing right now. So, you know, given that, right, people are kind of throwing money at the problem and doing all kinds of things to just get hires made and people in the seat as quickly as possible. We see all the time advertisements for $10,000 signing bonus, plus this $6,000 signing bonus. Come work for us and you can get a total $20,000 extra for this year. So there's a lot of things that are happening in a very reactive way to the teacher shortage across districts that is just increasing the competition and kind of, right, what shiny thing I can lure you with to come away and come work for us, even if once you get there it maybe is not where you want to be long term. This I'm not going to stay on too long, but you know, I thought it was interesting. Gallup, who we of course use for our K-12 engagement survey, released a report this summer in which they shared K-12 workers, teachers, as well as all employees within K-12 are reporting burnout at a higher rate than any other sector. Higher than healthcare, higher than everybody. So knowing that, right, and again, we kind of know what are the things that have been making the job hard to begin with. Pay, right, you deal with a lot with working directly with students, the family dynamic, right, the rules and policies and practices that are coming from district, state, national levels. But then there's also been the stress that's come with closing, opening, reopening, right, the response to the pandemic, and there not being any consensus around what the right way to do that is. That was a big point of contention and thing that many teachers and leaders on the ground have to deal with different parent reactions, right, of what should be happening or shouldn't be happening over the last 2 years. But then there's also the complexity around what is happening with the political issues tied to K-12 curriculum, right? What is safe to say, what is not? You know, I feel like I should do something, but I don't want to do the wrong thing. And then school safety, of course, right? Are other things that are happening outside of the traditional challenges that are now exacerbated and the COVID-specific challenges that are happening today. So I share that to just give a little more color and context as to kind of what is happening, right, at the bird's eye view within the sector that is leading to these numbers around just educator burnout. So we're thinking about this through the immediate need. We too are pointing our dollars where we can to help with the immediate openings and hiring that we have to do for this year with prioritizing our hardest to fill positions. We've expanded pretty significantly our teacher pipelines, and we are targeting not just college graduates, but students at community college and undergrads, and have a few new programs that we are running that have you know, kids that are still in school making that decision and joining a program that is financially sustainable for them to come and become a teacher. And then we're also continuing to do a bunch of ongoing problem solving. We're trying out new schedules, new things, new ways that we can just work around the vacancies that exist for this school year. Okay, and then last around barriers to engagement. I know that we've talked a bit about our doubling down on Q1 and Q2 on our Gallup Q12 engagement survey, which are the two questions that get at basic needs. I think that there's a pretty strong connection between basic needs and what people are telling us time and time again around working conditions. This I took directly from the state. TEA has put together a teacher vacancy task force to help just bring some minds and bring some collaboration and thought to what are we doing across the state, how can we be better supporting as a state, what is happening right now with teacher vacancies, with teacher attrition, with teachers leaving the profession. And this was one of the things that they shared, right? So in their state level data, they hear more than anything about working conditions, and it comes down to all of the stressors that teachers are sharing they have to manage in a given day, right? So many different expectations that you're responsible for students, thinking about academic, social, and mental health. The number of hours that a teacher works in a given day. You know, while the work day itself is about 8 hours, teachers are reporting that they work on a typical day 12 plus hours because there's just not enough job embedded time, job embedded planning time. You know, it's interesting, in the task force, one of the things that they also shared was that, you know, in other developed countries, teachers often are with kids for 3 to 4 hours a day, and they have the rest of their day to be doing planning and data analysis and all of these other things that we're talking about, whereas in America, most teachers are actually with students for 6 to 7 hours a day. Part of why we do that is because of the instructional minute requirement that the state gives us for how much with teacher time a kid needs, but just seeing that the state is starting to acknowledge and recognize some of that, I think is interesting. And thinking about, right, what are maybe some bigger changes that could be on the horizon for how we get at this issue around working conditions and just the load that teachers have to carry. So given that, these are what we're doing. We're doubling down on removing barriers to engagement through focusing on basic needs, with making sure that we have good cycles and just structures for actually measuring and talking about engagement with our staff. We've rolled out skip level meetings to have another way for senior leadership to stay very in tune with teachers in the field around what their experience is, what the things are that are getting in the way of their engagement so that we can go do something about it. We also are working on continuing to, I think this is a twofold, create inclusive environments, but also get at what teachers shared with us is an important need that they have this year, which is just, I need more support with how to talk about issues that relate to race, equity, inclusion that come up in the classroom. There's a lot of nervousness around what you can say, what you can't say, if I should address something, how I do it in the way that is going to be the most helpful for all of the kids in my classroom, but also, right, safe for me too. And so we're helping our teachers with that and rolling out a series of trainings this year and discussions for all staff around the frameworks that you can be using as you're talking about different issues and how we go about that in the classroom. So with that, lots of questions. Rusty.
So you talked about lots of options, and one that popped into my head, and it does it with the model where people are in class, children are in class 3 hours a day, right? Do you have any place you're piloting job sharing? Because what people like about what happened in the pandemic was going to work 3 days a week and working from home 2 days a week. The child care problem compounds this drastically. That's why our children have teachers in front of them 7 or 8 hours a day, because they have parents. So child care is an issue. Could you think about child care for younger children affiliated with your school? And have you thought about, I know it's very expensive, you double the number of teachers in some ways, but share a job.
So yes, that is one of the things that we're actively thinking about. You know, we actually presented job sharing as an option years ago, pre-pandemic, and very few people were interested in doing it. So I think the appetite for something like that could very well be different today than it was in 2016, 17 when we rolled that out.
But the difference there, Anne, just to interject, was we positioned it as if you want to be a part-time teacher,
right?
And obviously they make 50% of your salary, right? There was no interest in that, but is it different potentially if we can financially figure it out, where you could have two co-teachers in the room. That's like, who still get a full salary. That's the interesting model to try to figure out.
And as much as you want one teacher,
Even if they have no kids, yes.
one teacher relationship to student, most of these kids could use two adults in their lives and they're close to and know them. It just struck me, I'm like, what everyone likes is the split.
The tricky nuance to it, John and I talked about this earlier this week, is to make it financially work, you have to increase the class size.
Absolutely.
And parents have it embedded in there, like it's super ingrained in. The fewer the kids, the better it is, right? And that's actually not necessarily the case. Yeah, but they think it, and teachers are very mindful of it also. And so it's just, it is definitely an idea to think about that needs that has some mindset issues and other stakeholders we have to navigate to.
And so I would share, while we're not piloting job sharing, we are piloting how we can be using also support staff in a different way to try and create more meaningful blocks of time for teachers to plan throughout the day. So while job sharing is something that we're revisiting and actively thinking about, actually with TAs and resident teachers, those support roles and where we plug them in, how we use them in the schedule is something that we're doing some experimentation with this year to, again, create some more planning time that's embedded within the school day for teachers.
I just have two comments. I'm not an economist, but I'm married to one. And the best minds in the business right now are trying to figure out where a large portion of our workforce disappears.
Yeah. Yes.
And they cannot figure it out. There's a couple people who've done long-range studies that believe this is a phenomenon that started like 50 years ago. And largely it's employable males, which teaching being a female-centered profession, those women may be going other places that aren't now lack male leadership. I don't know, but I think it's probably a problem you're going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future. You know, so that's the way to think about it, I think. And the other thing is I think you guys have got a big PR problem. That COVID and the media and what happened with schools opening and closing and not being responsive to kids' needs, and now, of course, it all looks like it was useless. You know, that's an issue. And actually what I was thinking about is I was in banking in like the late 70s, early 80s, when banking had a PR problem. And we're trying to attract depositors, and they did a lot of goodwill advertising. You know, I don't know if that's any kind of a solution here, but I think that feeds into this teacher shortage problem.
Oh, I think it absolutely does, and I think it feeds into people's interest in picking that as their career. You know, I mean, it was already not attractive for some of the other reasons with pay, and just what people thought of as being a teacher, because you have to tickle broke. But I think absolutely the new segments and what the chatter is not doing anything. John?
So based on my 10 years in business and leading an organization, and then hanging out from the 4 directors who spoke earlier, huge impact, and probably the easiest, quickest way to change turnover is to have really competent directors and their bosses, regional directors, managing directors. So neither one of your and Remy and I chat about this a little bit at the break. Neither one of you really have spoken to their development. What's going on organizationally to have the best directors you can possibly have?
And as you answer that, could you roughly tell us how many people you're dealing with? Because I think it's a manageable, to your point, it's a manageable.
Sure. So we have, I welcome you to chime in at any point, Jeremy, but, so we have 45 academic directors. Excuse me, about 150. If you look at the full school leader bench between deans and academic directors, we've done a lot of work over the last year in thinking about principal pipelines, everything from standards and expectations for what the role is and how you are to perform in it, to how we prepare you, how we hire and place you at the best fit campus based on your skill set and what the community need is. And then Remy and her team has done a ton of work around the support and the role of the principal supervisor. We also continue to do quite a bit of formal training and professional development with them as a subset, with all of our leaders across the network. But we have leaned in heavily over the last year into really sharpening the skill set of our managing directors, knowing that they, as the one-to-one support and supervisor and the people that have the most touch points and opportunity to develop their leaders, in really making sure that the way that they are being deployed, how they're using their time, the type of support that they're giving the leaders, and helping them focus in on the highest priority things are right. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Remy.
I think I would just add, and I know we talked about tardily over there, it's just that that's what Mike and Priscilla's sole job is, to strengthen our leader base in terms of how do their managing directors directly support, and to Anne's point, putting in the infrastructure around what are the expectations for managing directors, but then what are leaders supposed to do, has been the work that Priscilla and Mike have led over the last year or so. I think it's just how do you get them to move and change with the current context has been what they're having to deal with in terms of making the 4 ADs that you saw here today are wonderful people. All of our leaders do not have their skill set and gifts yet. And so it's how do you manage to a certain standard and support those leaders to grow their skill set is really where, when I said we're on the ground every day, it is to do that work intentionally in the moment so that we're seeing faster development for those leaders.
Yeah. Ricky, question?
Yeah, so one thing I'm picking up, because I actually think that everything that you just shared and your question about scalable, kind of how do you walk in and be in the same, understand you're an Uplift, right, and have that similar experience are intertwined. Mm-hmm. I'm sure y'all see that too. But why I say, so the one question I have is, do you have an internal comm strategy, system-wide? So I know that those pillars are great, but how are you actually communicating and living that is more of a strategic approach, and it's an internal PR issue that I think it also presents. Second question I had, because I heard all of them say out there, the gentleman said that he was, he gave that example of that amazing principal when he was a student, and all those teachers went with that principal. So where does the affinity lie within the individual teacher? Is it to the principal? Is it to the managing director? Is it to the system Uplift? And I think that also plays into a good internal communication strategy. There should be equal share amongst all of those people that the average employee feels connected to. So I just think about we're not going to solve the pipeline issue widely, in the short term, but that retention and what you see here is based on the geography, based on the tenure of the person, that retention is really being driven right now, I think, at the local level. And then when you don't have a strong leader, to Remy's just most recent point, is can you create the affinity despite a not so great local leader, right? And that affinity comes from this organization, from you all, from this board, etc. So
Ricky, you said so many awesome things. I know Colin's about ready to transition to Deborah.
Yeah, sorry.
And I would just say, on your point about internal comms as a strategy, literally, Remy just rolled out, 2 weeks ago was our first one that we were we've got to get directly in front of our teachers beyond just the generic weekly newsletter. And so Remy and Senior Friends are doing these short videos that we send directly out to our teaching staff to say, this is what the exemplar of this looks like, this is how you should be doing it, and the why behind it. That way we don't just have 45 messengers, but we also can make sure there's a centralized message too. We're doing it through video.
I just wanted to say real quickly here, I'm going to encourage everyone to come to the reception. Hold on to your questions. Let's keep raising them.
We'll all be there.
Let's keep raising them informally, and let's also, we all know that we're going to be raising them formally for a long time to come. Personally, I think the demographics are going to be very challenging for a long time to come, and really salute you, Anne, and the organization for presenting in a way that recognizes we're not just dealing with some blip, but we have strategic things that we're, you all are thinking about it in a very thoughtful way. Thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank
like me to stand up and stretch or something? I feel like we need to have
Yeah,
a
anyone
mindful
needs to stand
movement
up,
break.
you're welcome to. Stand up for a
Stretch,
minute.
reach deep down in your pockets. No, just kidding. I joke. That's not the first part of my
We'll
presentation.
decide to take a brief break after.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you will.
I think we ought to go back
Am I going the wrong way?
to your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's super funny.
What'd you say?
When she first.
Yeah, that picture and the picture in my presentation
Yeah.
are very different.
They are. That was when that bad decision to have bangs.
Yeah, but also we're like,
That picture, and then John gave me the
20
feedback
years
that I need a
younger.
less blurry picture, but I don't have one. So like every time we have headshots here at Uplift, I've had like gum surgery or something. So it hasn't quite worked out. Hi guys. First, I want to talk to y'all about advocacy, and just wanted to share who the team is that works on advocacy. Ashley McConkey and myself, Yasmin, of course, and James, who had to leave for a funeral. Ashley is amazing. She worked for Speaker Strauss for many, many years, was with Nathan Johnson's office, and is so glad to be part of Uplift's mission. She has a real affinity to it and real knowledge in how the Texas legislature works. Oh, I do not know how to work this. So this part is really tight, but James wanted me to share that Uplift is well positioned within the Texas legislature. He's got some good friends in leadership currently, and there will be elections in November. Once those elections happen, appointments will be made to different committees, and then bills will start to roll out for the next session in January. And then we'll present those along the way and give you updates as they come up. Uplift has two main priorities tied to basically all the issues you've been hearing today. The first and most important one is to raise the per pupil funding. As you heard Yasmin start with her kind of baseline presentation, we really need $500 to $700 more per scholar to keep up with the demands of our workforce and inflation currently. So we're hopeful that we get close to that, and we're trying to explain the message to our leaders in the Texas legislature that we're having to use ESSER really to keep our lights on, not exactly, but it's helping a lot, us not having to make difficult choices within our budget. So this is a real key issue, and we have talking points and a one-pager in this presentation for you guys around that. The second important issue is eliminating municipality discrimination towards public charter schools. You guys are probably pretty well aware, as we've gone through the Uplift Wisdom SUP process, trying to get the new existing Luna moved just to a simple other location, in the amount of years, leadership time and money that we have had to spend on these silly issues is just a discrimination towards public charter schools, and we need that bill to come across the line this year. It's gone through the legislature a few times, and we're hearing some positive feedback on the House side where it stopped last time. So those are the two things we care about most. We will pay attention as bills start to pop up and try to kill the ones that are hurtful to public schools, and we'll add cumbersome processes to Remy and her team, and then support the ones that make sense for public schools. Gosh, I really get bad at this. Okay, so for board engagement, it's pretty simple. We have a board buddy list that we haven't circulated in the last couple of years because of COVID, and we are going to be sending that out next week for you all. So you'll get a spreadsheet. You will see our DFW delegation who's in the Texas legislature. We're going to add city and federal officials as well, and then we'll add all of Texas as kind of like a third tab. But we encourage you to say, oh gosh, I know Raphael and Chia. I would love to be one of his 3 board buddies, and that will just entail, we'll work with you to check up with him and just let him know what's going on at Uplift. Sign up for the newsletter, pay attention to social media, just help me an extra set of eyes and engagement for our state officials, and then we'll do the same at the city and federal level. So Ashley will be sending that out next week, and you'll have some time to fill that out. And this is how you will add, and then we want you to come with us to Austin So in probably March, April is usually when we end up going. We'll go and knock on legislators' doors. We have, Andre's been with us. He enjoys that time. He's really good at it. So has Cullen. He got to see his baby picture there with his dad in the bowels of the rotunda. Exactly. And it's just a great opportunity for us to make our case to legislators who are looking at our issues. And you know, it's just like any sales call, whoever's in there last is the smartest person that they heard, you know, from that day. So we just have to stay top of mind. And then we'll ask you on your board buddy list, as things come up and we know legislators have influence on things, for you to call and do quick check-ins with their office, which is pretty simple. No one ever asks you, you know, for you to give them the big white paper on the issue. It's, are you for or against it? Check the box, and then you hang up. It's about a 30-second call. So those are things that we'll be asking of you during the legislative session. So with that, I will pause.
I would just say couple that with the trip with the legislatures to the schools. That couple together. State Rep Collier, I mean, she's continued to follow up to challenge us on things that we're doing. So I think that couple with Austin trip, to have them come to our schools and tour.
Absolutely, thank you.
Does it say on that spreadsheet, like how they feel towards charter schools? Like, is
She's going to add that. Yes, if we know it, we will put that on there. And there's some open seats or people that are having elections, so that are not incumbents running. So we'll leave those blank, and then we can fill those in later. Yes.
On the Austin business, wanted to suggest, first of all, I know we've sometimes done it on the same day as other, like board people, senior staff of other, that we make the humble suggestion that we try to plan it far in advance so that we can maximize our group's ability to plan. And also just to anyone who hasn't done it before, it's a very strange experience to race through the Capitol wondering, is any of this having any impact and are they listening to us? But it's also, it's very, very interesting, and it's pretty fun too to actually see. It's very high energy.
Tons of steps in.
Tons of steps. Lots and lots of steps.
Don't have to work out later that day.
But somehow, we keep being persuaded by our lobbyists that if we're present enough in the people's offices, it gets noticed. So please do consider going.
Yes.
And we will get a date locked in early.
Absolutely, and we pre-schedule the meetings. Sometimes they're with elected officials, oftentimes, right? They're with 20-year-olds who are writing all the bills and really building the strategy under the direction of that legislature. So.
But that's actually sometimes even more important because they are the ones drafting the bills or drafting their response, so we can then give them the exact language that we want.
Yeah, they're great.
Are you guys prohibited legally from having your parents make these calls?
No, we actually will put parents on a bus and send them to Austin. We do that in coordination with the Texas Public Charter Schools Association. We have brought parents with us. We have gotten our alumni. We try to get the ones who are actually in Austin. It makes it easier to come in. We are hiring a college intern this year to help be feet on the ground for us during session.
We will likely have alums with us. We'll just get that.
Is there any legally binding or prohibitive, I should say, that we can let our parents know that these are the people running and these are the pro-charter?
That we cannot.
We cannot do that.
We can't do that with staff either.
No. So we promote everyone to get registered to vote and to vote in all the elections. And we share the entire slate through partner organizations who are just like get out the vote type of organizations. But we do not ever take a stance on any of our elected officials or people who are running for office.
How do we engage the state commissioners?
The State Board of Ed?
How do we engage them?
We have not done as much with them because Uplift is not needing an approval of our charter to come into Texas.
Okay.
I think we've kind of let those guys take care of those groups, but it is becoming a more and more important group to pay attention to.
I think
for the charter movement. Yeah.
I would also say that I think a lot of that work is done, directly with TEA. Like, you know,
Yes, Remy sits on Commissioner Murat's, like, what is your council called?
Chief Academic Officer.
Yes. So, exactly, so some of those decisions before they go to SBOE, we can at least.
Well, just, I said it because one, Ms. Davis has been very visible in Fort Worth, so, and I see her constantly, periodically, so I was just curious, just promoting and supporting and advocating for charter schools. Understand the vote that, you know, we're not submitting for application, but just having that relationship is all of it.
Yeah.
That's all.
You're right, Andre.
Okay, I'm gonna move us forward. This is the fundraising team. If y'all have not met Jessica, she is like my lifesaver, literally. She's our new development director. She came from the Texas Women's Foundation. Kelsey does not live in Texas any longer, but she is our grant writer, because she can do that from anywhere she would like to do. And then LaTrenda manages our database, thank you letters, all the kind of nuts and bolts of our work. And we are still looking to hire Jessica's boss, is what I'll call it. Oh, gosh, I really struggle. Okay, so before we hit this, I want to announce that we were able to raise $210,000 during North Texas Giving Day yesterday. $160,000 of it came ahead of time from Lyda Hill as part of her birthday celebration. She, instead of is receiving gifts, she's giving away gifts, which is fantastic. And we're really grateful to her, and she's having Ruthie's food trucks go to all of our schools to provide them those delicious grilled cheese sandwiches. So we were the top performer in our building. They had a lot of celebrations here and pushing money out the door. So we raised about $47,000, sorry, $49,000 without her gift. And traditionally we've been raising about 67. So I think overall their giving was down this year, but still we're really excited to be part of North Texas Giving Day and appreciate those unrestricted gifts. This is what we raised last year overall for our network, about $7.5 million. You'll see our very first ever true annual fund got to almost $700,000. I think we swagged it at 1.3 was our goal. Well, we kind of went high on that, but we didn't really know what was capable, so we just said, oh, this is what we need, and that's what we'll do. Yes?
Are all those numbers cash accounting, just literally how much cash at the capital campaign promises to be paid out later, not in there?
Correct. Okay. Correct. Yeah, so, right, because Hammond would have doubled this. Right. Exactly, but and actually I don't even think the $1 million is in there because they paid it after, they paid it for this fiscal year. Exactly.
It's going to hit in fiscal year 23.
Right, so you can see here programs, those are programmatic grants mostly. Dinner and dialogue, we did really well, and we're looking to increase that next year. We get school-specific gifts and scholarships, so I'll just stop there for a minute. We have a donor who is really passionate about giving to 3 schools, and he's going to continue growing and he gives a mix of scholarships to seniors, and as they continue on through their college plans, and he gives monies to the schools for staff retention and scholar experiences. So he's a unique donor that really provides a lot of joy to the schools, and it grows every single year, and it's about a little over $100,000 per school that he supports. Programs will be social emotional learning, road to college and career.
Those are gifts to those specific programs.
Exactly. Gosh. Okay, so Uplift's fundraising philosophy. Like a lot of private schools, we need to raise about 10% of our operating budget, right? So our Road to College and Career, our social emotional learning programming, that's about $12 million a year, or $600 a scholar that we need to be really out there looking. And we've just been able to finally crystallize exactly what that number is in what we need to be fundraising for our schools. So we are wanting to get to a place where we can regularly count on that through annual funds, so we can budget for it and just plan to have it covered in the next school year. Get it right. Our fundraising goals for this year, we're going to shoot for $1 million for the annual fund. I know that's pretty high from our 654, but we're going to try for it. We think we have the donor base to do it. Dinner and dialogue, we want to continue to increase the revenue from that event. We want to raise $3 million for the capital campaign. Specifically, we want to get to half raise for the Hampton Athletic Field and half raise for Uplift Gratis Pre-K. So those are two projects that we're trying to prioritize. That doesn't mean if someone wants to fund Uplift Luna K-12 moving that we would say no to it. It's just that's what we're driving towards. Programs, $4 million, and we want 100% of our board members to be giving to our annual fund and our dialogue, North Texas Giving Day. Gosh. So how can you all get engaged in fundraising? I have 3 of our development committee members here, Ricky, John, 4, Rusty, and Elena. And they've done a great job being engaged on the committee. We, again, want you all to give to the annual fund, and that can be done through North Texas Giving Day that passed. So if you gave to us, thank you. If you didn't, no problem. You still have a chance to give. We'll have annual fund letters going out. You can also contribute to Dinner and Dialogue and attend that event and bring your friends to that. And then separately from the annual 100% everybody giving, we want you all to start thinking about our capital campaign and how you might contribute to that in a meaningful way, kind of above and beyond the annual fund. And then the non-monetary piece, which is equally important, is we need you to spread the good word of Uplift and spread the PR amongst your circles of influence. So make sure that you're liking or on our Facebook or social media pages. There's lots of stuff going on. Share cool things that you're seeing when we post it with your friends. Invite them to Senior Decision Day. Buy a table and invite your friends to Dinner and Dialogue. Invite them to tour an Uplift school. We don't just, Yasmin and I are pretty tactful. We don't ask for money right out of the gate when we meet your, favorite friend. We're not asking for, sometimes, no, just kidding. So we like to build relationships and just kind of ease into it. So please don't be worried about introducing people to us. And if they're truly not interested, we will not badger them. So I just want you all to know that. And our annual fundraising calendar, this is what you can expect, right? July till now. We're going to start recruiting for our Dinner and Dialogue chairs. We have some ideas in mind, so we'll be moving forward with that. October through December, it'll be annual fund and Dinner and Dialogue table sales and promoting end-of-year giving. January through March, we have a ton of events that happen, right? We have our investor luncheon, which is not a ticketed fundraising event, but it's a great way to introduce people to Uplift. We have our Dinner and Dialogue event. We have our science fair, our art show, and targeted spring appeal just to kind of close out the year. And then, of course, April through June, we have Senior Decision Day. We really want to think about how can we bring people, one, to introduce them to Uplift, and then also make it an opportunity for people to give. I think that may or may not be. Oh, my key talking points. Sorry, there's 2 more slides. These are some key talking points. In your binders, there's 2 pages of talking points. Overall for Uplift, by programmatic themes, Dinner and Dialogue, why you should give. So please go through those. Really, Uplift is a scalable model example of how you can be a strong public school in Texas. So obviously Remy demonstrated that through our academic data earlier today. Our 2 signature programs, Road to College and Career and SEL, are our crown jewels, and they are about $600 per student to run both those programs. And then finally, right, giving to Uplift helps support our teachers that we've been talking about for a large portion of today, and being able to pay them even when the state is not in its legislative session gives us some flexibility to make sure that we're retaining and attracting the best talent for our kids. The Hammond gift, update on that. We just had a meeting this week with Texas Health Resources. It was amazing. For those of you that don't remember, the Hammond Foundation gave us $7.5 million over the course of 4 years to be able to build out a healthcare pathway program for our alumni who stop out of college or don't want to go to college, and put them on a path that will build them some nice credentialing to have a salaried job where they can continue to grow. So far, we've met with Children's Hospital, Texas Health Resources. We have a meeting scheduled with UT Southwestern and Baylor as well. And so the Hammond Foundation is working side by side with us in this. They're literally calling those hospitals who they give money to and asking for the meeting. So everybody shows up to that meeting that Kelly Roach is calling the schedule, which is pretty great. We're getting some really great information and direction on how Daniel and his team can build that out to be a positive impact on our healthcare system and our kids. There's a search firm that Yasmin and Remy and Ann have engaged with to hire a person that will ultimately build out this program and eventually add additional pathways to it. And so I think we're just up and running and in our learning. That's it. Yes?
Do you have other career day opportunities? That's a great way to involve the community, is to bring people in who want to talk about what they do to your seniors across the network?
Absolutely.
January 23rd to 27th is Uplift's Network Career Week this year. And our school engagement committee, the two other ladies you're sitting next to, are going to help us reach out to the board to secure speakers across the network. And you were completely right. That's another way of introducing people to the organization. So January 23rd to 27th is when we'll be asking for in-person and virtual speakers.
Any other questions for Deborah?
Deborah, back to your talking points. Just curious, does the word poverty versus low to moderate income districts, does the word poverty all still resonate versus calling it low to moderate income district?
I can't remember the last time I used the word poverty in one of my conversations.
Yeah. Right there, high poverty.
Yeah. I mean, I think we mostly talk about free and reduced lunch, and we talk more about choice and underserved is how we normally speak about it.
Right. So I'm probably would, the word poverty doesn't always resonate.
Right. Yeah.
More negatively than it does in a way that says it appeals.
No, I appreciate that feedback.
Just a point there.
Other questions? We will take a break and reconvene truly on time at 10 minutes still. And then we still have a decent amount to do that we're going to do on time.
We're totally going to do it on time.
We're going to get it done on time.
We promise.
Just a couple of things. Really want to show what each of the committees do, what our goals are for the upcoming year, and kind of where you can fit in with that. Doing something new, really looking at, and you have this form that we want from you today, really looking at how you can rotate between committees. And so you may be brought in to the board and introduced to a committee because that's your sweet spot. It's what you do every day. It's something that's really easy for you, but also really want you to lean into what those challenges are, maybe somewhere else you can contribute. That's going to give us really a comprehensive view of Uplift, and when we talk about it with much more confidence and authority. And of course, every organization has some gaps that they need to fill in, and so we kind of have this gigantic audit of all the board members, where we fit, and then kind of where are some things that are missing. And so it's not just about our committees, whether it's finance or audit or real estate, but race and ethnicity, gender, all of those financial standing. Did you go to college? Do you have an advanced degree? All of the things that our families, our scholars are facing, we want it to be represented in the board. Okay, so we're going to quickly go through each of the committees. If you are a committee chair, you will present your own slide. And then you're it for everyone. And then Yasmin will present her. Yes.
Add it to the mix. awesome. Richard has been on it and is still on it. The work of the audit committee is really discreet. Basically happens during the time of the audit. We are in the middle of the audit right now. If anyone wants to join our fund, that's great. But basically, our job is to make sure we have a clean audit.
We have submitted a request to change our name to the Fun Committee. We had our first meeting last week, a little wine and cheese in the backyard, and
it was fun.
It was fun. We didn't get anything done.
Did you raise any money?
No, no.
Probably not.
No, it's okay.
But that's the best sale so far.
I'm going to look at this, and we now have a pretty good-sized committee. But I think, as was mentioned earlier by Deborah, everyone on the board has a role and can contribute to the development effort. So I'm not going to be as focused as trying to get you on the committee as I was a couple years ago. I have to understand the board's role to support the development work. But we are the Fun Committee. Thank you, Don.
I didn't push it.
Oh.
Fun's back. Oh, you're doing it.
Sorry, I didn't know that was working. So this is.
Oh,
now you're good.
You're good. We were competing.
Amanda's punking you.
I didn't get it, Amanda. I did it. Okay, finance, Michael.
Yep, finance. But I'm going to change you over to the fun committee. Exactly. Finance. It's kind of the committee I think a lot of people don't necessarily always want to be on. It's not as much fun, but it deals with, obviously the finances are very important. There's a lot of issues I think coming up for the schools over the next few years. So I think the more help we have, the more eyes, the better. I think Colin put it best though, a couple meetings ago where he said, we're not there to micromanage, we're there to help and kind of guide. And I see just asking the right questions of the staff, and that's what I try and do.
Do you order, or do you have cheese after the board?
No, all there's calls actually. We haven't done anything in person. So I know it's not selling people. But it's less time. It's less time. It's shorter.
It's less time.
More
if you
efficient.
want to be virtual, you can pour your own glass of wine.
There you go.
Yep, you might need to. Yeah.
Well, I'm changing committee, so it's not as important.
Governance, myself, Osa, Ricky, Colon, Leo, and then of course Alex has been our supervisor, making sure that we're doing all the things right and don't get ourselves in trouble. We meet once a month and we do 8 a.m. virtual, and it is absolutely fantastic. Because you get to do it in your PJs or on your way to work or when you're already at work. And so governance, I think, is really took kind of a shift a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, really looking at the type of, looking at creating a greater pool of people, and then kind of this pipeline that we're feeding committee chairs, of course, people who actually sit on the board, but also looking at leadership. And so that shift has really begun to happen. Of course, you just experienced this, managing the annual board officer election process. We have a great opportunity to add 6, really probably maybe to 10 people on the board, which is really fantastic. And then really leaning into this idea of don't just sit on one board your entire term, kind of rotate around and spread the wealth and spread the joy to other committees. So that's my spiel for governance. We get to meet once a month, and I take more of your time, but it's really quick.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Kim was supposed to be here today, but this company is in fundraising mode, so they had to visit with some investors. So this maybe is like, the selling point about this committee is we just meet ad hoc when we have to, and we bring in a ton of money for Uplift, and we make a good transaction. But right now, our focus has been on navigating the sale of the current Uplift Luna site, and so we are spending time with our broker. We are under a letter of intent for the
property, and so the committee will just continue to provide thought partnership during that process till we get all the way to close in December. They also more broadly, when it's time to go to the bond market, they partner with the finance committee. So the real estate committee says, here are the projects that we want to raise bond funds for, and then the finance committee is the one who evaluates and helps support the actual process to raise the bond fund. So broadly, those are how those two committees work together.
Question? Is that an ad hoc committee or a standing?
It's a standing committee, and the reason why it's a standing committee is because literally for years, because it deals with bonds, which go towards new Uplift schools and renovations on Uplift schools. We had a bond issuance almost every 18 months. And then also, for so much of Uplift's tenure, we were opening up a new school every single year. So this committee was the one watching from the time we acquired the land with the architects to the construction all the way through.
All right. As a result of support from this board, we determined that we needed an advisory board committee. So thank you. And this is the newest committee to build awareness, you see, of Uplift and Fort Worth, provide more detailed lens of the performance of our students. We have, and thank you to Don and to Yasmin Cullum for assistance. We've been in a 6-month search for some strong leaders in Fort Worth. So Tracy Siler Jones is she is the Assistant Chancellor of Communication for TCU. Kenny Mosley is the Executive Director of Renaissance Heights United Foundation. Gilbert Rodriguez is a Community Manager for JP Morgan Chase. So we really have been intentional in finding some community folks to really spread the word, have greater PR for Uplift, working with Yasmin. And we'll have our first meeting on Tuesday at Crescendo. So thank you so much. And you know, some folks have friends, relatives, cousins in Fort Worth, let me know. And we'll meet probably on a quarterly basis.
School engagement. Okay, I don't want to offend anybody, but we are the actual fun. And this is true, because what we do is going to be about community. And you can kind of see the purpose and what we're doing, but what we're doing this year is we're going to build on the staff appreciation efforts. It was lovely to hear how much they appreciated the notes from last year. And so we're actually not doing notes this year, but we're doing lots of other fun things. The first will be what is probably going to be coffee carton donuts for the teachers at each school. So just surprise them one morning in the fall, go from there, but then we'll be doing things with that throughout the year. If you have any ideas, we'd love to hear them. So this ACT test prep pilot program, one of the fun things of this committee is last year we did a pilot program in literacy where we put a book into the hands of every second grader. And then we got a lot of authors to contribute reading their books on our YouTube channel. So this year, in consultation with Yasmin and others, we looked at who needed the love and came up with the high school. And so we're looking at a test prep program for students who have scored in a certain range where we believe that we can raise that range and increase their likelihood of a good acceptance decision from their list. And so we don't want to leave, that's select campuses and a select group of students. We don't want to leave the rest of the test takers out. So Yasmin had a great idea that we are following up on right now. For all of the test takers, we need to have an ice cream truck outside the test location for when they finish with the test. All of you remember when your kids took this test to socialize afterwards and also to get some calories is a big deal. So we're going to source speakers for Uplift's Career Week as part of our purpose. And everybody knows somebody who would like to come and talk about what they do. or somebody who owes you one. So we can all think about who that is. Pilar and I yesterday put the arm on the head of the Baylor Medical Foundation to send us someone.
Great.
So I would just ask you to keep us in mind, and when you're having dinner with your best buddy who has a super interesting job, ask them if they'd like to give like 1 hour in January. So lastly, in terms of creating goodwill and community, Pilar had the idea to create a basketball game where the teachers and administration play a tournament. It turns out something like this was already somewhat in the works. So we have signed on to make it even better with concessions and trophies and cheerleaders. And I want everybody here who has played basketball in their life to raise their hand.
On a team,
And
yeah.
you are automatically invited to participate.
You don't have to play.
That's right.
Just have to.
Well,
waivers.
I know.
Just for the record, you want Remy, she's a ringer.
Okay, but
It's
we
true.
have a ringer, and a board member who's not here today.
It was Roz. Roz.
Yeah.
School, everybody.
Played at Ohio State.
Division 1.
Yeah.
I'll just, yeah.
Anyway, we also going to take it easy on you, and that game will be played half court. So, I realize it's a big distance. So, but we'd also maybe like a corporate sponsorship to do like jerseys for everybody, or t-shirts for all the kids who we want to come, you know, and who, you know, will also make it available on, you know, on television or tape or YouTube channel or whatever. So if anybody has any company that would be good to approach for that kind of corporate sponsorship, I'd love to know about it.
And it's also.
Well, that's in PepsiCo.
Okay.
One of the other
He's like, I'm out.
benefits that Uplift was already working on is raising money at that event so that they can have athletic board recognition dinners, right? Or banquets or. So we're trying to figure out how we can, you know, selling snacks or whatever so that they can have, I think they wanted 2 a year. So that's the goal. I think that is, yeah. So anyway, and a lot of times businesses, when they hear that, they're like, oh, you know, come see me, I'd like to put a name on the jerseys, or we'd love to provide, PepsiCo might provide, you know, Frito-Lay chips for, anyway. If you have any networking or any suggestions or any ideas, we'd love to have them.
We'll also accept cash for everything that we want to do. Say a targeted donation. Does that count toward the?
Yes. Deborah.
Yes.
I'll consider it.
Have you ever done quiz bowl?
What is it?
Has anybody in the network ever done quiz bowl?
No, we had a network-wide principal.
That would be fun.
That would be a lot of fun.
College bowl.
Colin, did you do quiz ball at St. Mark's?
Yes, some, yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I did agree.
I'd love to be on the board team that takes on
Yeah.
this.
He's like, forget about basketball.
Anyway, we'd also love volunteers, so if any of you guys
Yes.
are looking to do some more board work, committee work, many hands make for light work, so.
Yes, and we're also starting to think of creating a junior board. Like kind of grooming people in their 20s who aren't overcommitted to work and family, who are interested in education, and, you know, our committee is a great place for them to start because we'll be in the schools. It's pretty light work, it's fun work, it's stuff that they'll get. And so if you know anybody who's just out of school, who's interested in these things and would like to have a philanthropy, to spend some of their time up, we would love to know about it. And we'll do all the approaching if you just let us know who you can get might be.
And that's great. On your interest form, the last question, or the second to last, it says identify any potential board members. If you know any young professionals who might be great adds to our school engagement committee, as it is described as part of the junior board component of it, please write their names down, but just note that they're for
the Young Professionals Board, not the Uplift Board.
Me?
Yeah.
The Strategic Planning Committee does really 2 or 3 things. We worked on the 5-year strategic plan that you asked when we started the meeting with. And on an ongoing basis, we kind of review progress against that plan and work with leadership and the rest of the board to make sure that our plans and priorities add up to meet our mission, basically. So that's one thing we do. The second thing we do is, I call it somewhat special projects oriented. So we lean in as a thought partner on a few key topics. One with some of the teacher related, what does a day in the life of the teacher look like, innovation stuff that Ann and team already have in progress. And then the next one will be around, and you see it on here, the Hammond Grant was mentioned, and how those healthcare pathways fit within, how we strategically do that the Uplift way. And that'll be really the next topic that we'll be convening a meeting on here shortly for the Strategic Planning Committee. And then I would just say the third thing is we try and push for innovation and think of our role as Uplift and as a charter school, that part of our impact that goes beyond our own schools. Are we pushing the edge in the right places in a way that if others were to copy us, it would be helpful to the world?
Great. So we'll give everyone just a few minutes, if you can please fill out your form and literally just leave it then on your table, and then we will pick it up.
I would love just to chime in and accentuate something Dawn said very well, but just to put in my 2 cents as well. And we had some strategic thinking about the direction of the board, I think we did in recent times, and it just seemed to all of us that it's just a good idea to ask you all to stretch into some new categories, to help our board members learn new things about the organization, to help newer board members get ready to be maybe a committee chair in another year or 2, like i.e. learn the material. So I guess what I'm want to do is put in a plea, write something down that doesn't come naturally, where maybe your curiosity is high, but you don't at this moment feel like your knowledge is high.
Perfect. Well, y'all are filling that out. I'm going to put on my other hat here and give our finance update. There's positive news in it. So I think our 2 motions here are going to be pretty easy breezy. I want to introduce J.W. Bentley, who's our Director of Finance in the back. And so glad to have you here, JW. Okay, finance. And first of all, I'm so sorry for the problem with the attachment in the pre-read. By the way, I don't even know how to create a file that requires access. Let's be super clear. So I am sorry that I had to PDF it and send it out. I think because we were pulling in some financial files and like existing templates and put protections on it that again, I have no clue about. So on the finance dashboard, it's a little different this time in your orientation of it than what you typically see. The top 2 boxes, enrollment and attendance, are this current year. The bottom 2 boxes are reflecting our year-end close, the end of June, and then we'll start, and the amended budget. We'll start showing you the bottom 2 boxes here, starting in our next meeting. Because this update is really about closing out officially last school year. So on enrollment, you can see we are above budget. That is a good thing. It's better for us to be above budget than below budget at this start of the year. Really now, it is all about managing withdrawals. That's why I shared earlier, like every day we're sending the leaders, here's where you're at. Maybe going into second semester, we'll add 100 to 150 kids who transition in for second semester, but right now, it's all about making sure we maintain and do our jobs what we're supposed to for our kids and families. Attendance, we already talked about it. We budgeted at 95%. We're hanging out at 94% right now. On the bottom, liquidity has historically been strong. We ended the year strong as well. And then on our amended expenses, you can see it's like barely off at all versus what we told you in May. So that was strong as well, that our forecasting was
Yeah, so
good.
is our current enrollment enough, if you factor in our historical average losses, are we in good shape?
That's the bottom light blue.
See,
That's the prediction.
that's the prediction with our historic, because, John, what's
That's a projection based on our current number? Okay.
Yeah, and because what's
Okay,
happening,
thank
right, is we're adding kids as they're leaving, so that's like the net of that transaction.
I read that to be budget, but I understand. Thank
Yeah. Okay, so this is just a deeper dive on that enrollment number. It's the same slide we've been seeing, how, you know, we kind of have this, lots of kids before the first day of school, we see the drop, we add back in. This is as of 9/16. The slight difference between the number on this slide for enrollment and the prior is in finance, we count children for the funding we get, and we only get half-day funding for pre-K children, so that's why the enrollment number looks smaller than it does here where we're counting actual children, which is who we serve, actual children. So that's a good thing. Okay, on the amended budget, lots of good news here, right? So the end of May, we brought you this first call. We said, this is how we think the year is going to close. In September, when we do the final reconciliation, we had positive favorability in two main revenue areas. And you might wonder, like, why in the world are you doing a September amended budget? That makes kind of no sense at all. Well, that's because the state gives us our final payments after our year end has closed. And so part of this favorability in state revenues of $2.6 million was the state actually delivering on some attendance relief from last year that they kind of dangled but didn't tell us the final number. So we had to wait to get it. And that gives us that $2.6 million of favorability. And then on the $2.3 million in private and local revenue, some of that was we met grant conditions that allowed us to move it from deferred revenue to revenue. So if Ed was here, he would say some of the trickiest parts of our audit is dealing with revenue recognition on grants because of restrictions and conditions of when we can count it as actual revenue. So net, that gave us that favorability in our debt service coverage ratio from 1.25 to 1.36. So that was great. So I'm going to skip through these details unless someone really wants to go into that. My last slide here is on investment policy. Every year, the board has to approve our annual investor policy. These are public school funds, and so it's incredibly conservative. If you read the investor policy, we can only really invest in governmental assets. Like we can't, it has to be highly liquid too, right? Now, right now, that's fine because the 6-month treasury is at like 3.8%. So actually, we're going to do a little bit more in that area, which we're allowed to do, while still maintaining that liquidity. We have two main agents that help us in terms of our security brokers and investment advisors. We hold all of our excess cash in a Regions investment account. We have to maintain certain liquidity numbers for our bonds. And then our bond proceeds, before they're drawn down on from construction, are at Bank of New York Mellon. So those are the two. That's why you saw both of those brokers. And every year we have to let you know who we are still using, approve our investment policy. JW and I need to go do our 2-day annual investor training, which we will do before our audit is done. Otherwise, it's an audit finding. So we will make sure that is taken care of. And then once you all approve this investor policy, I will then send it to Bank of New York Mellon and Regions to let them know that you all have approved the investment policy that they are following. They will acknowledge to me they've received it, and we will continue. So that is my update, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have. And then we have 2 motions that we need. We do need to approve an amended budget to send to TEA now that we have our final reconciliation with their revenue numbers. And I also need for you all to approve the investment policy, which only has the change of adding me in officially, even though through the board bylaws I can sign off on anything, but we officially wanted to put it in the policy.
I will take any questions.
How are you trying to find replacement?
We literally just hired Thorn as our search firm. And so, because we're just a few weeks into this, and so we should, I think Ann and I are getting a kickoff call scheduled with Thorn for next week. Okay, how long do you want to officially,
Okay.
you have to ask for both of the motions for me,
Okay.
please.
We have a motion to approve.
Well,
Second.
You're
Second.
going to do them
Thank you,
together?
Sarah.
Are you telling if you can do it together, or you want them separate?
I mean, it'd be better to do them separately.
Will you do them
So we're
separately?
doing the amended fiscal year 22 budget first.
Okay, thank you. So I have order intent for moving the amended site to 22 budget first. Have a motion, second? Second. Okay. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And the second,
Is approve the investment
the
policy.
investment policy. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Thank you so much. Second. Thank you. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Awesome. So then now you are going to move us into closed session.
Yes.
We have 30 minutes in closed session. We'd like all the board members to stay. All of the staff is going to leave. The way we're going to do closed session today is 2 parts for you. The first is some board members ask for just private time with me and Remy. So Ann and Alex will also step out and just be hanging out, enjoying some coffee or water. And then after that time, then I will actually step out with Remy. Alex and Ann will come back in, and you all have my review to do. And then everyone will go over that way to Community Brewery, and we will enjoy some time together. So all of our staff that I just mentioned is going to step out, and I think you have to officially put us into closed session with your script.
Let's see. Okay, the board is now moving to closed session. Continue the time, right? The time is 4:21. The board is now back in open session. The time is now 6:39 p.m. and I note,
No, 5:30.
excuse me, sorry. Oops, 5:49. And I note here the same quorum of the board is present. I also note that the board did not take action or vote in any way during closed session. There being no further business before the board, the meeting is adjourned. The time is now 5:49.